the technical capacity to operate the fields that it owns 100%. It doesn't have the technical capacity. So those fields, it operates what they call the Financial Technical Service Agreement, FTSA, where it brings in third-party vendors, contractors to operate those fields on his behalf. So you have service contracts, that's NEPL, Nigeria Exploration and Production Limited, which was former NPDC, Nigerian Petroleum Development Company. You have marginal fields. Those are fields that typically do not produce much, frontier acreages. You won't get more than max 10,000 barrels per day from those fields. You have unregistered joint venture, which I think at the last count, I counted about 47 of them that are active currently, that are producing active OML blocks, if I'm not mistaken. Then you have production sharing contracts. So Section 1094C was inserted into the PIA because the framers of the PIA foresaw a situation where in the future Nigeria will have midstream refining capacity. So up until last year, there was no midstream sector in Nigeria. There was just the upstream and downstream. And they said, okay, let's create a way through which the operators and the joint venture partners can offer their crude on a willing buyer, willing seller basis to the operators in the midstream sector. There's also a section of the PIA that says unless you run an integrated energy company, you can't have same company operates upstream, midstream, and downstream. So that's the reason, for example, why Anuando will divest as soon as the PIA was signed, divest from his downstream business, because there's a section in the PIA that forbids you from having the same company unless you're an integrated energy company from participating in both the up, mid, and downstream, and that's because it's trying to prevent a vertical monopoly.
Oh, I see.
So you notice, for example, that NNPC has not done that because the PIA says that NNPC can't control more than 30% of downstream. Before last year, they were controlling nearly 100% between when the Naira was floated and maybe end of first quarter last year towards the second quarter. They were controlling 100%, nearly 100% of that downstream markets, because it was difficult for the other companies to source FX, and they were basically running through NMPC trading for magic oil. So back to Naira for crude. So you offer the crude to the refineries, about 8 or 9 of them, Aradel, DuPont Midstream, the so-called NNPC-owned refineries that, in my opinion, are not working, and I'll explain in details and also take questions for it. You have Walter Smith. Aradel is currently doing about 11,000 barrels per day. Walter Smith is doing about 10,000 barrels per day, if I'm not mistaken. And then the Naira for crude says that you offer either in USD or Naira to the players in the midstream. So the government says, okay, you know what? To create a situation where, because we don't have a liquid, non-deliverable forwards market at the central bank, where if, for example, I want to buy something in 6 months' time, instead of me to, what Nigerians usually do, if you want to buy something from China, for example, worth like $100,000 in 6 months, what they usually do is they'll just go to the FX market, they'll buy $100,000 worth and deposit in their domiciliary account, so that, they don't have any issues with, because they don't know where the price will be in 6 months, Carlo.
Yeah.
Now, because of that culture of, holding FX, to forestall any high VIX markets, because you don't have a functional derivatives market to help you hedge like you have in other developed markets of the world. You have excess of $30 billion sitting onshore in domiciliary accounts across Nigeria. Okay? And that has been a problem. I think last year, government even tapped into that and borrowed some money from the holders of those funds. So because of that, right? It says, let's create a Naira option, which is protected by the PIA, because I've seen people say, oh, why would they sell crude oil to Dangote in Naira? It's in the Petroleum Industry Act. It's there. If you read the section 1094C, it's in the PIA. It's there.
It says that Dangote should buy in Naira. What does it say?
No, it says that anyone who plays in the midstream sector, who has active refining capacity, right, is allowed to buy crude oil in either USD or Naira.
Oh.
Okay? So the government now took advantage of that section of the PIA and created the Naira-based crude swap, where it offers a percentage of what refiners need to them in Naira. So when they set up the technical subcommittee, which is being chaired by the EC of FIRS, they said they were going to provide Aliko with 385,000 barrels of crude on a daily basis. 385, Carlo. 385. You know, and the reason why they were going to do this is because, like I said, the NDF market is not liquid. So you can't say you want to buy $100,000 worth, for example, of USD that you need in 3 months or 6 months, and say that because the rate is 1545, for example, today, in 6 months, the rate will remain at 1545. You don't know where it's going to go. The rate might go up to 1008, or it might come down to 1003. Okay? So they created that option to avoid the fluctuations with the FX market and to create stability, because they know that the volume of FX needed for crude oil purchase and that you need to play in the midstream sector is high. Okay? So that was why they created the Naira-based option to offer him 35,000. The government was not supplying more than 120,000 barrels per day as Naira option. The rest were being paid for in USD. As a matter of fact, Carlo, from when he started refining last year, late January last year, the first 36 million barrels, which were spread over several months, up until when that Naira-based crude swap started in October of 2024, was actually paid for in USD. So NMDC said that they supplied 84 million barrels. So the first 36 was paid for in USD. Okay? And it wasn't only paid for in USD. The crude oil was actually offered through trading companies that put on their own commissions. Not $35 commissions per barrel.
Not the NNPC.
Carlo, I will not say something that, is I'm not sure that this is what happened. 36 million barrels of crude before Naira-based crude swap started was not only offered in USD, was not only purchased in USD, they were purchased at a premium with commissions in tow. Okay, so when the Naira-based crude swap started, that commission structure collapsed. But then the other 48 million barrels of crude was actually not offered in completely in Naira, because the perception is that, you got 48 million barrels of crude in Naira. That's not true. Out of that 48 million barrels between October till date, only about maybe 35 to 40% were actually offered in Naira. So effectively, you're looking at anywhere between maybe 16 or 17 million of 84 that was actually offered in Naira. Okay?
Yeah.
So if, for example, that is the case and he's still able to offer PMS and AGO to the markets in Naira and provide for bridging allowances, because the responsibility is so. I also notice that a lot of people don't understand how the refining business works. Anything outside the gates of the refinery is not the refiner's business. His own is to sell white transportation fuels and non-transportation fuels. It's not the refiner's business what happens outside the gate. As soon as you do your paperwork, your Incoterms, and you either take from gantry or you take through vessels, single point more in the SPM, what happens outside that is not his business. Okay? So, for example, based on the PIA, Dangote cannot operate Dangote downstream, Dangote filling stations, because the PIA forbids it.
Okay.
Unless you have an integrated energy company. Okay? So he's selling to the companies operating downstream. Now, Kalu, there is no evacuation for transportation fuels in Nigeria. In other parts of the world, they evacuate from refineries through cargo trains. They evacuate, that's within the country. They evacuate through cargo trains. They evacuate through pipelines called distribution pipelines. Okay? 5,000 kilometers of multi-product pipelines, aggregation, transmission, distribution, are controlled by a subsidiary of NNPC. And I have said, look, if you operate a closed loop model where the government maintains control over pipeline infrastructure and it's like reach is leverage limit for finance to either rehabilitate non-functioning pipes or secure those pipes or add new pipeline infrastructure to enable distribution, then what you should do is go from a closed loop model to an open access model where you can bring in competent players in the sector to operate a PPP model. And all of this I'm saying is not new. The Bureau of Public Enterprises designed a model in 2012, for bringing back Atlas Cove and Musimi. There are about 22 retail service distribution companies structure they designed, because there are about 22 major depots around Nigeria. Okay? But the main key pipeline infrastructure you need to evacuate, PMS from the refinery in Southwest, Atlas Cove and Musimi, are out of service. They've been out of service for like 5 or 6 years.
So Kevin, just if I can understand what you're saying now. So NNPC is not selling crude or all Dangote needs in Naira. Dangote is still buying in dollars. And Dangote cannot operate he cannot operate his own filling stations. So Dangote is still importing in dollars. So what's this Naira policy we're talking about?
So the Naira policy, like I said, is it was created to enable him price the products in Naira at the refinery, and also to enable him have legroom to be able to over time effectively reduce prices. Okay? And I explained the reason why that is. Number one, is protected by the PIA sections 1094C. Number two, Nigeria does not have a liquid derivatives market. So if you're going to buy FX to hedge, for example, and you need it in the future, you don't have a system where you can pay a premium to lock in the rates. So you don't need, if for example you need $100,000 in 6 months, you don't need to go to the market and buy $100,000 and lodge it in your DOM account. Not doing anything. The money is not doing anything. It's just there. Which is what Nigerians do. And I don't blame them for good reason. And I said, earlier, Kalu, you know this, onshore, Nigerians have $30 billion onshore. Okay? And a lot of that money is because of this lack of a functional liquid derivatives market. People have all kinds of obligations. School fees, they have goods they want to buy, they have commitments in different parts of the world, and they need FX. And because you can't predict the rates, they go buy FX and they just keep in their DOM accounts and it's not doing anything.
So if this has not worked, so because the point, if you ask a Nigerian on the street, he tells you Dangote has been getting crude in Naira. And now the news is that Dangote's crude has stopped. Dangote himself said, we have stopped the Naira for crude. We're going to start to sell in a different currency. I don't know what that means. So if there was no subsidy from the start, or if the subsidy was not, like you said, maximized, then what are we going back to? Is this not what we have been? Then how is Dangote able to reduce the price? That's the second question.
So I'll tell you what he was actually getting from the government, I'll say, I told you earlier, anywhere between 110 and 120,000 barrels per day. If we do a simple maths, we do 120,000 barrels times 1,341 liters divided by 1,545, for example. So what? No, sorry, I'm doing the wrong calculation. I'm actually supposed to multiply. So a barrel of crude will give about 73 liters of PMS times 120,000. Yeah, that's about maybe 8.7 million liters of PMS that you get from the crude oil that is supplied in Naira. So anywhere around 9 million. So let's just say, for example, that is about what he was supplying the Nigerian markets for the off-takers that were taking from him, Adova, MRS, and the little NNPC was buying from him, so he was able to actually offer the market in Naira the equivalent of what the government gives him in Naira. Okay? The remaining feedstock that he buys in dollars, both from the Nigerian market and the ones that he brings into Nigeria, he's able to refine and then sell off to international off-takers that buy. And then he also has volumes stored because they're about a throughput of 600 million liters at every given time. So
are you saying that the PMS that Nigerians have been enjoying is the NNPC Naira? That the NNPC Naira one is the one we have been enjoying the lower prices. Is that what's going on?
So what, like I said, okay, because a lot of the members of the major marketers, are not yet collecting PMS from him. A lot of them. I wouldn't say that the share of the Nigerian market that he has is significant. I wouldn't say it's over 50%.
Oh.
Okay? It's not over 50% because, and I'll come back to the details, okay, on this issue about sections 317, 7 to 11, actual daily consumption of PMS in Nigeria, which NMDPRA does not have a framework to measure. And you can quote me anywhere, Kalu. NMDPRA today, they don't have a framework to measure the daily consumption of PMS in Nigeria. They don't. You can quote me. I will say this to them one-on-one. Okay? What they use to calculate actual daily measurement of PMS is projection. They don't have a framework to measure it.
So what do you mean? So PMS is imported. Where do they measure it, at the port or at the filling stations? Where is it measured?
Carlo, if you can't measure what you consume daily in Nigeria, there is no foundational basis on which sections 317, 7 to 8 was captured. And I'll explain why. Because that section of the PIA says that, look, if the domestic market has proven capacity to supply the Nigerian markets with transportation fuels, the regulator is supposed to stop giving out import licenses or withdraw existing import licenses. So if, for example, you don't know the actual daily consumption of PMS in Nigeria, how do you know if the domestic refiner has achieved full capacity? Dangote is currently doing 44 million liters of PMS. 44 million today on a daily basis as we speak. Is at 600,000. It's over between 550 and 600,000 barrels per day. And it's doing 44 million liters of PMS. So if the regulator does not know the actual daily consumption of PMS in Nigeria, what is the foundational basis of sections 317, 7 to 8?
I see your point. Kevin, that's on a byline. Is PMS still being smuggled? Is there still a price differential between, say, Nigeria and Benin and Cameroon, even with the subsidy removal?
Kalu, all of those, they are fairy tales. They are fairy tales because the biggest, anyone who is familiar with downstream business knows that crops, typically, the one that the government banned was about 60,000 liters, tanks. So let's just say there are 60,000 liter tanks smuggling petrol out of Nigeria. For you to have people smuggle 20 million liters, which is insane and unreasonable, it's completely ridiculous that people will actually believe that anywhere around 20 million liters of PMS is smuggled daily, Kalu, out of Nigeria. I have my calculator here, so let's simply divide 20 million by 60,000. That would be 333 60,000 litre trucks. Come on.
Yeah.
What are the customs doing at the borders?
Okay, true.
Are they just sitting down there and watching trucks pass? It's not possible.
Okay.
So if they are even smuggling, Kalu, they are not smuggling more than maybe 1 million litres or 1.2 million litres or 1.5 at the best.
Okay. And you said, so NNPC gives Dangote crude in Naira at about, you said 100,000 or so barrels. And you said NNPC is making about 44 million. Is that enough for Nigeria?
Dangote is making 44 million.
Yeah, 40.
Dangote is making 44. So Kalu, let's go back. You know, you're a data person. I've seen you over the years, and I know that every single time you speak about stuff, you always bring it on the basis of science, data. If Nigeria was consuming 21 million litres in 2002 under PPRA, 2002, Kalu, 21 million, and the compound average growth rate stayed between 7 and 9% between 2002 and 2012. How is it possible that all of a sudden CAGR went from 9% 2012 to over 250% in 2025?
Kevin, so say it plainly. Say it plainly.
Population growth rate is 30%. 30%.
So what's happening, Kevin? Say it plainly. What's happening? Because
what's happening is that numbers are being concocted to justify fake importation of products into Nigeria. Now, the reason why the numbers are being concocted is to avoid obeying or complying to sections 317, 78, because there's an existing court case. Dangote sued the regulators, to have the judiciary interpret sections 317, 78 of the PI. Numbers have been concocted. So how is it possible that CAGR went from 21 million litres in 2022, that's about 23 years ago, to 70 million litres, when population is growing at 30%. And then all of a sudden it fell from 70 million litres in 2023, it fell to 50 million litres. Like, somebody just wakes up in the morning and say, okay, you know what? This month, this is the consumption number we're going to tell Nigerians to do. Are we in a banana republic? So
if I could summarize, so this it's not been smuggled out. The numbers have gone up. Population has not kept pace. There's a recession in quote. So we can't buy the same. We're not using the same PMS volumes because we don't have disposable income. But numbers are going up because we are working on the figures to justify import licenses.
It defies logic. It's almost like someone said that in Nigeria, elephant can fly. It defies logic, Kalu.
Is the import license backed up with dollars? Well, what I mean is this: if I'm importing, does CBN give me dollars? Is that fake import license used to get dollars from the CBN?
So a lot of the marketers have found it difficult. So you have a situation where some of the companies that bring in products, they, structure bank guarantees with lenders to be able to bring in products, SLBC. Like a few months ago, a lot of that product was brought in by state-owned enterprise. I said between October and today, they reported about maybe 4.6 billion litres of PMS. NNPC brought in 41.5%. I put out these numbers and they've not been able to dispute it, because when you check shipping tallies for the motor tanker vessel tanker report, shipping documents don't, I wouldn't say they don't lie, okay? But what is on the manifest is on the manifest, because there's a lot happening in this country. People just don't understand the industry. The shipping tallies show that NNPC received 41.5% of 4.6 billion litres of PMS in the last 6 months. So how do you deliberately, try to force into Nigerians that they consume PMS they don't consume. And Nigeria does not consume more than 30 million liters of PMS per day. It doesn't.
Okay. All right. So Kevin,
just to justify giving import licenses to bring in products. So to answer your question about how do they get the dollars, it is a very important question. Very important question. Last year, NNPC was owing about $6.5 billion through carrier agreements to traders who were landing products for them to Nigeria. They used to call it DSDP. It used to be oil processing agreements under Jonathan. Then it became direct sale, direct purchase under Buhari. And then they stopped DSDP, and then 2020 to 2023 it became vendor financing program. So you structure like a carrier where you tie a producing asset to a loan that you've structured with a commodities trader to land a certain amount of products for you. So it's a swap. It gives them crude, they give you these products. But who measures the matching of value? So the amount of crude oil I give you, knowing fully well that PMS is only 73 liters of a barrel of crude, which is about maybe 159, 160 liters in a barrel of crude. No one measures it. NNPC trading, which is formerly called, structures these agreements. You give crude to collect PMS. Who measures that the value of crude you're giving, less all their interests, is the same with the amount of products you bring in?
Mm-hmm.
So at the point, they were supplying so much product to Nigeria, right? And they were not getting the crude as payments based on a crude oil swap that is structured in four-sale agreements to pay these commodity traders and vendors. Okay, and then their loans piled up. So these transactions are usually 30, 60, 90-day transactions. If you hit the tenure and you don't pay, it goes into demurrage and it's priced at LIBOR plus CRP, country risk premium. So it used to be LIBOR, London Interbank Offered Rate, which is the interest that you charge on these international transactions. It now became secured overnight financing rate of 6% plus the CRP. So that was how they accumulated that debt over a period. And then the president came and said, you know what, we're going to fully deregulate the market and allow for market forces to take over. Because what was happening was, on whatever NNPC was giving to the Federation, they were putting a subsidy charge. Mm-hmm. Subsidy charge means there was an under recovery that became what they call FX differential. Okay, and state governments were complaining that FAC didn't make any sense, and it says, okay, we're going to offload this burden we've been carrying to Nigerians to take. And NNPC then was supposed to start remitting dividends to the Nigerian government, which is crude oil they lift, less the royalty oil, less the tax oil, because there are 30 types of oil they get. Royalty oil is for NUPRC, the regulator, because they are the ones that have the technical ability to calculate the royalties based on debt, price, and volume. Tax oil is for FIRS, Federal Internal Revenue Service. Profit oil is for NNPC. So NNPC lifts, then remits to NUPRC, FIRS. The FIRS tax oil is tax, it's basically your tax. Royalty oil is for NUPRIC. Then profit oil is what they are supposed to collect, keep 20% as dividends, and I think 10% as Frontier Basin Exploration Fund, and then remit balance to Federation accounts. Okay? But it was from this profit oil they were using to structure all their four-sale agreements.
Okay.
So that was the basic method that was being used to pay for most of those crude oil, petroleum,
the subsidy
in Nigeria. Yeah.
So Kevin, I just want us to, because folks are following, right? Okay, let's say I'm the president of Nigeria, and you were saying that the import numbers have been grossly exaggerated. Why? I'm asking, is it because I want to get dollars? Is it because I want to why am I exaggerating the import number? That's not a simple answer. What is in it for them to exaggerate an import number. There's no subsidy, right? So if you say you are importing more, you're not going to get paid more. So why is the number being? Because I just want to be clear. Why would anyone say I import more when they import less?
So under subsidy, Carlo, there's what they call bridging allowances. Okay, bridging allowances is contributions that the markets have to make on every liter of PMS that is sold, and that the carrier has to deduct as compensation. First, number one. Number two, not all the products that are quoted in the motor tanker vessel report actually lands at the ports in Nigeria. Some of those numbers are only on paper. So if you inflate the amount of product that comes in, it's possible that the vessel actually gets to the ports and then is diverted.
Okay. Yeah, but why? Because in the past, there was a subsidy. If I say I import 10 million barrels of crude oil, I get paid subsidy on 10 million. Now there's no subsidy.
The elephant in the room, then when there was still subsidy, and by the way, NNPC is still attempting to, add subsidy charge at their remittances to FAC. And that was the reason why in February, I think you saw that the governors, the commissioners of finance across 36 states walked out of FAC and said that they have 1.7 trillion naira that's been owed to them that has not been reconciled by NNPC to the Federation, because NNPC is federal, state, and local governments. It's owned by the Federation. So if the government is providing under recovery, if I bring in 5, in actuality, and I say I bring in 10, government owes me 10, not 5.
Oh, say that again. So you're saying if I inflate my numbers, then the government owes me, there's no subsidy. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay, fine. Thanks for that. Let's go back to the overall policy, Naira for crude. Was that a good policy? I know it's in the act, like you said, but why are you paying Naira for a commodity sold in dollars? Mr. Dangote exports aviation fuel to the US. He's paid in dollars. Why can't he just pay dollars for the crude oil, do his exports in dollars, and then subsidizes the local PMS with the dollars he's earning? Why must he pay in Naira?
So, Carlo, I'll bring it back to what I said earlier about the FX markets in Nigeria and lack of a derivatives, functional liquid derivatives market. Crude oil is very volatile. One of the sections in the PIA talks about transfer pricing. There's a lot of transfer pricing going on, but even the regulator does not know how to produce a gazette, a full regulatory gazette, because every section of the PIA, the regulator is supposed to interpret and produce a standard operating procedure and rules of engagement for all the players. For some of them, they have. For a lot of them, they have not, because, I don't know, they just don't like doing heavy lifting. The section on transfer pricing, the regulator, I don't know if it's because they don't understand it or they don't want to. They've not produced a framework to govern transfer pricing in Nigeria. Crude oil prices are very volatile. So what refiners do is they hedge the risk of the fluctuation in price. Okay? And it is a very complex way. I don't think for the benefit of this space, it's going to confuse a lot of people.
No, I hear you, but the question is like, we know Mexico would sell and hedge for the entire year. Niger does not hedge. But I'm just wondering, go ahead.
Dangote does not have home advantage. Okay? It doesn't have home advantage. Please explain to me why he's traveling to Angola, he's getting asset report from Basra in Iraq, he's getting asset report from upstream provider operators in Libya that does not have a central government and have not had one for more than 10 years since the Arab Spring. Libya. He's importing crude from the US. Now he's waiting to see if there will be a resolution between Russia and the US so that maybe he can start importing crude oil from Russia, because Russia is currently sanctioned. when you have a situation where the operators here tell you, oh, you know what, we have stabilization clause in our contracts with the institutions that gave us loan to operate these fields and produce crude oil. We owe them. We already signed off-take agreement, export finance facility. We can't, commit to giving you XYZ number of barrels. NNPC says, oh, you know what? 450,000, the crude intervention stock, because crude intervention stock is 445,000 barrels per day, is already committed to forward sale agreements because we signed all these loans, collected cash, and we have to deliver cargoes. Like they want to do another forward sale agreement. $7.5 billion this year. $5.5 billion has already been syndicated to Saudi Aramco. I don't know who the remaining $2 billion is going to go to yet.
This is, you're saying that NNPC is getting more loans and giving the collateral of Nigerian crude oil.
Carlo, there's another $7.5 billion coming in a fresh forward sale agreement, a fresh loan.
Okay, this is but you just said the act says that in
2034. Till 2034.
Oh, okay.
Repayment is till 2034.
So, Kelvin, look at it this way. You said the PIA says the Nigerian government has to supply crude oil to Nigerian players. So why is NNPC allowed to borrow? If it's not going to have the oil for Dangote and other local players, why are they allowed to borrow? Is that not in defiance of the act?
Carlo, have you seen anywhere in Nigeria where people obey laws? I mean,
oh, man.
You and I are here where a governor was suspended is not in the 1999 Constitution, 188, 305, 320. No part of 1999 Constitution gives power to suspend the sitting governor. And then the National Assembly that wrote the law, passed the law, they're supposed to call the attention of the executive and say, look, this is impeachable because there's no part of this Constitution that gives you the authority to suspend the sitting governor, actually went on against their Senate rule book and voted without counting the tally to show that the quorum has been achieved at the House 240, at the Senate 76, and voted to pass a state of emergency. So, have you seen where we obey law? We don't obey laws. There is a set of laws that govern how things are supposed to operate, but it's not followed. Because the PIA says specifically, and the gazette that NUPRC produced from sections 109, Carlo, says that the NMDPRA is supposed to take a tally of the shortfall of the refinery. So if, for example, Dangote is doing 650, for example, maybe he has a shortfall of 100K or 50K or whatever shortfall he has, you're supposed to send that number to NUPRS. NUPRS is supposed to produce what they call a request for quotes and forward to the operators and ensure that until they meet up with that RFQ, that the Ministry of Industry and the Ministry of Finance does not sign off export permit to take products out of Nigeria until they ensure that the domestic refiners are supplying the crude. No one is obeying it. That was why early this year, NUPRC came out with a calendar, a schedule of projection and say they expect that within the first 6 months of 2025, about 8 to 9 refineries will get 123.6 million barrels of crude. But who is following it? Nobody is following it. So if Dangote does not get crude, and he has to import crude, and he has to provide either a bank guarantee or pay for the crude in cash, to bring in the crude, you've got all kinds of handling charges, and the price of crude oil is fluctuating steadily, right? What exactly do you want him to do? How does he bring in that crude, refine, supply the market, when there's no mechanism for him to buy premium to hedge the rate and say, if I'm supplying them at this rate, at the equivalent of 1,500 naira per liter, which you get by basically dividing the number of liters in the metric ton, which is 1,341, by what you're supplying, and divide by the exchange rate. Yeah. The CBN should guarantee me that I'll get the dollars at 1,005. If nobody can guarantee him that and provide him the liquidity, then he has no basis for selling in Naira when the government is not offering him crude in Naira, because he's going to run at a loss.
Let me just summarize what you're saying. You're saying that Nigeria has crude oil. Nigeria exports crude oil. Nigeria imports PMS. So Nigerians, in their wisdom, said, listen, we're going to have a local refinery in Nigeria. Then we'll supply that local refinery in Nigeria with Nigerian crude oil. So the local refinery can refine Nigerian crude oil and supply PMS to the Nigerian public at a price that is lower than importing. But what you're saying is that the PIA has been ignored. The NNPC is now borrowing dollars and using that same crude oil that should have gone to the local players as collateral. So it's exporting crude oil. The local refinery is now importing crude oil. CBN dollars are used to import crude oil. NNPC is also bringing in dollars that is going to pay dollars back as interest charge. This is in the same country that wants a strong Naira. Am I over the target more or less?
There's a part of there's an angle to the conversation or your summation that I did not bring in. Let me just quickly bring it so that you can summarize it fully. So earlier we're talking about competition, a level playing field. A lot of people have been saying, why don't you allow everybody to import, let them compete? So, how do you operate in a market where one team has 14 players, another team has 10, and you say it's fair competition? And I'll explain what that means. So if the same PIAs, same sections 317, subsections 11, says there's an approved sulfur limit, because the sulfur limit of your PMS and your diesel determines the price. Ultra low sulfur diesel, USLD, 590 for example, which is very high grade unleaded diesel, for example. The price is not the same with diesel that has 50 ppm or 100 ppm or 200 ppm. They are priced differently. So if people are bringing in products to Nigeria with sulfur level of above 750, 1000 ppm to Nigeria, and the gazette that the regulator produced from sections 317.11 says that when your vessel is approaching a port, the regulator is supposed to take a sample of his product, take it to their lab, test for sulfur level and a few other things, properties, determine that it's not above 50 ppm, because that's what is specified by the PIA. It's there. Sections 317.11 is there. ECOWAS came together in 2020 during COVID, and they agreed on the sulfur level. After they agreed, they allowed all member nations within ECOWAS to create an allowable limit, to revise it upwards for a period of 4 years. That period ended December 2024. Nigeria revised to 200. After December, it was revised back to 50. But even at that 200, it was not being obeyed. So how do you have Dangote producing PMS that is between 10 and 50 ppm, which meets up with the regulatory standard, and then you have others importing PMS above 750 ppm, which is much cheaper to bring into Nigeria because the level of sulfur has a consequence on the price, and then you say it's a level playing field?
Okay.
Because the regulator does not have a lab to test, either willfully or out of ignorance.
Interesting. Quick question for you. Are the NNPC refineries working? I mean, it can be a yes or no answer, or you can go into details. I don't mean blending. Are the NNP? We have 4 of them. Is any refinery owned by the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited taking in crude oil into that refinery and bringing out PMS, diesel, and the rest?
Carl, very interesting question you asked. The reason why this question is interesting is because it doesn't make any sense. It beggars belief that you say that Port Harcourt, that is 60,000, as Elime Phase 5, 60,000 barrels per day installed capacity, and then worry that has an installed capacity of about 125,000 barrels per day. So, based on the installed capacity they have, so let's do 185,000 barrels per day multiplied by 73 liters. They're supposed to be producing 13.5 million liters of PMS. 13.5 million liters. NNPC stations in Nigeria are not up to 2,000. So if the installed capacity of Eleme Phase 5 and Warri, like they claim is working, they're supposed to be bringing out 13.5 million liters of PMS. Why are they importing?
Man. Okay.
Number one. Number two. Those two refineries were actually not built for refining PMS. The companies that built those refineries many years ago, Shell and British Petroleum and the likes, they didn't build it to refine PMS. They were built as huge modular refineries to produce LPFO, AGO, naphtha that they needed for their operations, shallow waters, offshore. So they don't actually have, I think Warri has a CRE, but it's not functioning. The CRE is a catalytic reforming unit, right? That's supposed to break down naphtha and distill into PMS. They're not functional. So if you don't have a CRE, for example, Walter Smith's Aradel is just getting around to installing a CRE for his 11,000 barrels modular refinery in River State. Okay? So it does LPFO, it does naphtha, it does AGO. But it doesn't, I think it does household kerosene, HHK, but it doesn't produce PMS because it doesn't have a CRE. Okay, so if you don't have a functional CRE, how are you producing PMS? You can't, number one. Number two. Number three, if you refine crude oil and you produce higher distillates like premium motor spirit, it is compulsory, Kalu. It is compulsory. It's just like saying that you burn firewood and not get charcoal and you will not see smoke. If you burn firewood and you get charcoal, you see smoke. It's not possible to burn firewood and you not see smoke. If you're refining PMS, you're supposed to recover what they call petroleum gases. If you're not recovering petroleum gases, then you're not refining PMS. Petroleum gases is what you call your liquefied petroleum gas, LPG. Kalu, LPG. So for Nigerian blend of crude that typically has like a density level, because it's light grade of between 29 degrees and above, you get more propane than you get butane. So you get methane, propane, butane. We get more propane than butane because of the fact that, let's say, it's light grade crude oil. For heavy crude, you get more butane than you get propane. Nigeria uses more butane than uses propane for cooking gas or industrial processing machines that requires LPG, right? So all the food processing companies that have industrial equipment for processing stuff, food, they require LPG. That's the LPG that is being imported into Nigeria, mostly butane, because NLNG produces a lot of propane because of the kind of gas that you have in Nigeria from the crude. Okay? So it's not possible that you refine crude and you distill naphtha, you break down naphtha and distill it into PMS and you don't recover petroleum gases. So if those refineries are working, where is the LPG? They've not shown anybody where the LPG is.
All right, I think that answer is clear enough so I can follow. Let me do this final work. Lots of guys want to speak. I got Cyrus here and the rest. So just quickly, right? When they look at the Nigerian budget is premised on revenues, the corporate income taxes. If you drill it down, those revenues are all oil related. We call them corporate non-oil taxes, but they are all oil related. If NNPC is borrowing money in dollars and paying interest in dollars, and NNPC is a limited that's supposed to pay dividends to the federation and to the government, right? Does that borrowing affect the revenues that you and I as Nigerians are supposed to receive back to FARC? What I'm asking is, when NNPC borrows, is there a direct correlation to how much NNPC can remit back to FARC?
So, Carlo, when they borrow, it means that they structured forward sale agreements. They sold Nigeria's crude and collected cash. It's like Esau selling his birthright to Jacob for a plate of porridge. And the reason why I say that is because when you structure wholesale agreements which are resource-backed loans, it always favors the lender. It doesn't favor the borrower. So if, for example, you're raising $3.4 billion, which was what they did with Gazelle 1, I'm aware there's going to be a Gazelle 2, and you committed or pledged 164 million barrels of crude, which at the strike price of $57 per barrel amounts to anywhere around maybe $11 billion. In exchange for 30.4, it favors the borrower and all the syndicates and middlemen in between, and not the lender and not the borrower. Okay? It simply means that you're borrowing from the future to spend today, but you pay back with interest. And you also pay back with the inflation of the amount of feedstock you need to repay that loan, which you've committed to. So at the time they structured Gazelle 1, they said, that we're going to set up an offshore DSRA, I think in the Bahamas. An offshore DSRA, debt service reserve account that is not under the oversight of the committee, Senate and House committees on finance. They don't know, I'm sure maybe they know about it, but officially they don't know about it. They don't have any oversight authority over the offshore DSRA. So it means that it's the borrower and a few actors that control it. So if, for example, crude oil price goes above $57, which is the strike price, the excess between the strike price and the open market rate will be paid into the DSRA. It will not be subject to the Senate or the House, to not be remitted to the CRF, Consolidated Revenue Fund. However, that money is used is strictly at the whims and caprices of the people who are in charge of it.
Okay.
So you borrow money, you spend, it take you 4, 5, 7, 8, 9 years to pay back. It's the future that suffers, because in the future, in another 3 years, when you need money from your oil is already committed to those loans. There won't be any money, but you spend the money you borrowed in 1 to 2 years. So who pays? And then the federation is suffering because the money does not belong to only the federal government. The money belongs to the federal, state, and local governments. Okay, unfortunately, the state governors, Nigerian Governors Forum, has been surprisingly quiet. I don't know if, I'm sure they can get experts to come explain to them what's going on and show them the balance sheets and see these are the things you need to ask at NEC or FEC or at the FAC meetings. Yeah, but they've been quiet. So if the people who, say that, how do they put it? You can't cry more than the bereaved. So what do you want Nigerians to do?
Okay, so just to correct that question, who gave NNPC the power to borrow internationally? A state government cannot borrow internationally. Why does a limited liability company owned by the federation have the power to commit Nigeria to foreign borrowings? Who gave them the power to borrow internationally? That's NNPC.
So there are different types of loans they've taken between 2019 and date. The first one was NLNG 27. I think we spoke about this on one of the spaces I had last year. 2019, they needed to finance Train 7. So the reason why they needed to provide upfront cash and they could not do all the, we don't have the money, we're the government, you go ahead and raise the money, and then when you start producing the gas and you start selling the gas, you can debit it with interest from my own share of dividend. Because NLNG operates what they call an incorporated joint venture company model, which is what I've always advocated for. IJVC means that whenever there is the need for project financing, all parties are supposed to bring up their own share of capital. There's nothing like the other party is going to carry it, which is what they do with joint ventures for oil and gas upstream. Okay? And I will also explain something that will shock you, that is contained in sections 302 of the PI. I think I've discussed it before on carry tax relief to operators. They came, structured the wholesale agreement, borrowed the share of what NNPC, which is representing the beneficial owner for the federal government of Nigeria in NLNG, that owns 49%. was supposed to contribute. So that was how all this fossil started. Borrowed. The next one was the rehabilitation of Port Harcourt and Warri refineries. You got contract award letter, there was no cash. And then says, "Oh, Mr. President, don't worry, there's no problem, we'll raise the money." How? Nobody cared to ask. So they structured the fossil, and that was how the culture of all these fossil agreements started. You have $14 billion to date. In 2019.
Yeah, but where did they get the power from to borrow? That's what can NAFDAC go and borrow abroad?
The country that obeys laws.
Okay, so just want to be clear. So do you think they have the power to borrow abroad? Because I know NAFDAC can borrow abroad.
So as a company, NNPC is a limited liability company. As a company, they have the power to raise finance for projects.
No, they are owned by the government.
Company. The major shareholder of NNPC is the federal government of Nigeria.
Good.
As a company, NNPC does not have the legal authority to borrow on behalf of the government.
Okay.
For the government to finance its budget. That's the misalignment.
That's the question I'm asking really there, because it's a given that NNPC can go and do a forward sale to borrow, like you're saying now. It's going to be almost 10 billion on whose authority, on whose repayment. I am the taxpayer in Nigeria. You are. Olumide is. Whose authority are they borrowing? It's off balance sheet. It doesn't show up on the budget of Nigeria. That's the point I'm getting. Corporation is a different matter, but limited liability company borrowing at will it's a cut down on FAC. So a state can sue them and say, no, when you borrow, you reduce my share of FAC. They can sue them for that. But
Carlo, that's a very good angle. But the question is, the state governors, are they aware or are they willing to do so? Because they can challenge it at the Supreme Court.
All right, let's not. I think there's a lot to. Let me see if we can get folks. A lot of folks want to speak. Yeah. Let's get folks to speak. Olumide is here. We'll add folks to talk about just the oils, this Naira for crude. Then we'll continue with the gas policy, the gas pipelines, and all. Olumide, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually wanted to be about Kevin. He has made interesting space. Well done, Kevin. I have so many questions I want to ask you, actually. And honestly, the first, so I'll try and be very brief, but the questions are like in 6 places. So I wanted to see your view about the fact that, okay, does it not make more sense Dangote getting WTI, looking the US blend that is about $10 less than what the Nigerian crude is selling? Does it not make more sense? Then also, I also have the problem, and I don't understand why Dangote doesn't have that home advantage. Is it because he didn't really give that? He didn't give the present administration political support? Because the accession of President Tinubu, you could see some hostility between Dangote and the administration in the early stages. Is it really at play? Then I was reading Reuters and Bloomberg reports, and I saw that there were a couple of oil cargoes that were unsold. And the question I was asking is that, why couldn't that be uploaded to Dangote, knowing fully well that, okay, the excuse they were saying that a lot of Nigerians oil had been contracted for forward obligations to pay for forward sales. So I was looking at why we don't, the consumption of Nigerian oil has reduced, because now we are seeing increasing European buyers going for discount oil. Nigerians oil is kind of premium. Then another question, I felt a bit embarrassed because I usually quote NBS data a lot in terms of Nigerian oil consumption. And it really made a lot of sense, because I was trying to look at the fact that looking at our earnings and looking at revenue, looking at Nigeria, it doesn't really make sense. You can't really show the evidence that Nigeria makes 15 million, consume 15 million liters of petrol. So, what best do you advise, like, for people that write stories around the space? Where do you think we can? Because for me, for example, in the US, for example, I'll just look at the IEA, I look at many. So which credible solution? Then lastly, I feel that, do you think that the river, because I feel that the river crisis, though it looks like it's a bit settled, don't you see it having a dark cloud on Nigeria's 2 million barrels per day? And don't you see that Nigeria has to change this political strategy where the president is the head of the oil ministry? Because I think it has been dysfunctional so far. right from President Buhari. And I think President Tinubu doesn't really have the time. Yes, he seems to have somebody competent as special advisor, but does he really have the strong will and the acceptance in that industry to really take those things done? Because honestly, I was so positive about energy. You look at the NGX, for example, 2023, 2024, the energy stock was booming. But right now, we're seeing some reversals. We're seeing dark clarity. What do you think can be done? Thank you.
Lots of questions. I hope Kevin took notes. Olumide also be there to remind him. Kevin, some great questions there. Yeah.
I took notes.
Please go ahead.
Yes, I took notes, yes. Olumide, thank you very much. I also need to, extend my regards to you for very great work you do on TV. I watch your interviews on X, consistency of your tweets, and the fact that you're very focused and you really help a lot of people. So thank you very much. And interesting questions you asked. On the question about WTI and it being cheaper, of course, refiners basically have to not only mix between Brent and all the 34 blends of Nigerian crude that is mostly known as Bonny Light internationally. Because, when they refine, they are always trying to strike a balance on the yield they get. Dangote is currently around 54% yield per barrel, and the kind of derivatives they get. So heavier crudes with higher density actually give you more non-transportation fuels, like more polymers, polypropylene, polyethylene crystals, polyvinyl crystals, PVC, PE, PP, tar, carbon black. When you eventually get to vacuum distillation, you start doing lubricants, base oil for lubricants. They also have to, look at what is available and what is close. Because you agree with me that there is a handling cost of transporting crude across maybe 8,000 to 9,000 kilometers. There's a handling cost. It's not free, based on Inco terms. It's cheaper to get crude from Nigeria, not just because of the properties, the asset report of the crude, but because of the costs involved. Because you have to find a way of factoring that cost into your economics of production and pricing to the markets downstream. So that is a reason why it makes sense to have the home advantage of getting your crude domestically, not just because of the density, but because of the costs of transportation and haulage. That's one. The one on the reason for lack of home advantage and we getting into politics, I try to stay away from it. I try to stay away from it. I don't know what transpired between the both parties, pre-election, during elections. I can't speak on that, but it's for the benefit of Nigerians that they have as a good working relationship between the private sector and the government, and nobody's been witch hunted. On the third question, unsold oil cargoes on the high sea, and then it comes back to the first one. So if, for example, the people who you're selling to are getting Brent, or they're getting crude. So I'll give you an example. Let's just say Nigeria sells to some refiners in Belgium, in Netherlands. And interestingly, some of these companies are owned by the same IOCs that operate in Nigeria. Shell has refineries, they have supply agreements with some of these refineries that are tight. And whatever they are buying from you is either because they want to store because they foresee a hike in price, or they just need more sweet crude, or the supply agreements they have are falling short and they need to mark up, and they've hit capacity. For example, you know very well now that between OPEC and OPEC Plus, there is an argument for, do we increase supply in the US and bring Russia back officially to the market, which will increase the supply and bring down price and make it difficult for operators who their unit cost of production is above $50 to survive. And how do we balance it with ensuring that we don't take them below their unit cost of production to the extent where they have to cap their wells and shut in, and because the factors in the market are not conducive for them to make profits, So it explains why Nigeria, some of the cargoes that NNPC has is finding it difficult to get buyers, and they are hovering on the high waters. Daily consumption of PMS, Olumide, I mentioned to you, and this is something I'm willing to go on the record. Nigeria today, as we speak, the MBS relies on the data from NMDPRA, and the MBS cannot say categorically today that NMDPRA has a framework for measuring daily consumption. It cannot say that. And I challenge NMDPRA. If they have a framework that can provide empirical basis on which to measure daily consumption, I will concede to them. They cannot. They use projection to guess the daily consumption, which flaws the foundation of sections 317, 7 to 8 of the PIA. Because if you don't know how much PMS you consume, how do you plan? How do you do economic planning? On what basis are you going to interpret sections 317, 7 to 8 of the PIA? How do you know that your domestic refiner has or has not exceeded the actual daily consumption capacity? How do you give more licenses to companies who want to build new refineries? It's a very important piece of data. It's an extremely important piece of data. And my guess is that they actually know the true north of Nigeria daily consumption. And the argument that we're at 50 million, which is obviously not true, is deliberate for obvious reasons, to justify giving out or maintaining import licenses for people who bring in products to Nigeria. Okay? So, I'll tell you this. To be fair to the companies that have built throughput bulk storage terminals that have been in the business longer than Dangote has, Dangote only started refining last year. What is the path forward? What's the reasonable path forward that is considering of them? So it's difficult for you to say, oh, you know what, Dangote just came, want us to stop our business. Dangote is not asking anybody to stop their business. I think he's only asking for fairness. If I give this amount of quality to the market, which is specified by the PI, if you want to bring in products, at least meet up with what the regulator set as regulatory limit for the kind of products you bring into Nigeria. Because that changes the entire conversation on pricing. If you can meet up with that quality of products, which has a consequence on price, how is that fair competition? You bring in a low quality product price at a lower amount per metric ton. Now, when you do your numbers and you divide per liter to Naira, it gives you an unfair advantage over the refiner that is meeting up with the regulatory limit of PMS. Then you don't have a level playing field. Number two, is it possible that the government brings everybody to the table and says, okay, you know what, this is our reality, this domestic refiner is at this capacity, is exceeded the actual daily consumption. The path forward is to transit you people from importing these products, give you licenses, put you in an FTZ, give you reliefs, industrial tax relief, priority status. Go build your refinery, form a consortium, build a refinery, and compete with Dangote. That is a path that makes sense, because when you do that, you notice that you begin to adjust your policy to OPEC. For years, Nigeria has been a member of OPEC, with OPEC quota to. We're going to move from OPEC to DCSO, Domestic Crude Supply Obligation, ensure that our domestic refiners that are now commercial and are able to refine meet up with domestic capacity, export the difference, bring the FX back to the CBN to do balance of payments. That's the part that makes sense because, you get about 8 different derivatives when you refine crude. And for each barrel of crude you refine, if you refine and get all those derivatives and maximize the value, if you're buying crude at maybe $75 or $80 a barrel, you might end up creating value of anywhere between $150 and $160 a barrel. So it makes more economic sense to refine your crude into derivatives and sell the crude, the difference, and export it for dollar and bring the FX back to Nigeria for balance of payment. And it makes sense to export raw crude oil. That's the part that makes sense.
So I mean,
for the outlook for the industry on the midstream.
And Kevin, not to interrupt you, but isn't that the whole point of saying don't sell crude oil to Dangote in Naira? Give him the crude oil, charge him in dollars, let him export his aviation fuel, and then pay back dollars. I mean, that's simple enough to me that this Naira dollar accounting doesn't make sense to me at all. There's no subsidy gained. Are we not paying more today?
Carlo, so I'll tell you what. On what they were supposed to give him, the equivalent in PMS of 385,000 barrels per day is not, if you multiply 35,000 by 73 liters, I have my calculator here, let me just run the numbers quickly. 385,000 times 73. That's 28.1 million liters. That's around the true north of what Nigeria actually consumes.
So
Dangote is not supplying the markets with that because it doesn't have the relationships downstream for off-takers to take products to supply the domestic markets in Nigeria.
But he could refine it and have it, and the Nigerian government could say this product is available in Lagos in Dangote at this price. Go and get it.
Carlo, let me tell you the flip side to that argument. The flip side to that argument is that if your refiner has to look for dollar to import crude or to buy crude, there are 2 ways he will do that. He will either get it from the retained earnings he gets on. So he exports products, he gets dollars. He uses some to sterilize the debts he has that he borrowed to build the refinery. And the remaining he uses to buy crude. Or he doesn't have dollar. He doesn't have dollar up to what he needs to buy crude. He rates the FX markets in Nigeria to buy dollar, and Naira keeps dropping because of demand is higher than supply.
Okay.
So,
I don't know.
Are you seeing the flip side to the argument?
I see what you're saying. I don't want to take away from this question because we have a lot of guys with their hands up, and I want us to.
The last question he asked about the capacity for energy reforms. Listen, I will be fair. There's been little progress. Okay, where we were in 2023 is not where we are today, especially upstream. However, when you look at the commercial terms on which some of these new FIDs are structured, for example, Bonga North, which is part of the Bonga family, Bonga Main, Bonga Northwest, Bonga North, and Bonga Southwest. Okay, they are actually not on PIA terms; they are on PA terms, production agreement terms, which is pre-PIA. So the benefits from what you get, the exemptions that Shell and its partners, production sharing contracts, not a UJV model, would have not normally brought because of the fact that PIA was signed in 2021 August, you might not get a lot of exemptions. Deep water up to, I think, 450 million barrels of crude. Total estimated ultimate recovery in Bonga North is about 300 million barrels. Okay? So there's been progress, but I find that a lot of the incentives that has been given, because if you do a modeling on the commercial terms and you benchmark based on global best practice for several other countries around the world, upstream, you see that they are too generous. Okay. The reason why the companies are not bringing in a lot of capital to invest in Nigeria are not because of incentives. They are too generous. So I think there is a lot of work to be done convincing the IOCs when they are competitors now. Senegal is crossed 100,000 barrels per day. Tanzania is going to join very soon. Mozambique is coming strong. Namibia has issues because it's getting more gas than oil in its exploration results. They're just new frontiers around Africa.
Okay.
The Guyana is also a major competitor to Nigeria. Kalu, in the last 5 years, Exxon has gone from 0 barrels to 660,000 barrels in 5 years. In 5 years. Nigeria has had its sector for 57 years and counting. Guyana went from 0 to 660,000 in 5 years. And Nigeria at 57 years that you've had the oil and gas sector is at 1.47 million barrels.
Just on the flip side, wasn't it Guyana that General Gowon went to and told him that our problem was not money but how to spend it? Wasn't it Guyana that we went and paid their 6 months salary? I think it was Guyana. When Gowon flew there to refuel and there was a strike. And he said, what's the problem? They said they're on strike and he paid 6 months salaries. And I think it was Guyana, but that's beside the point. Cyrus is here. Cyrus, you have a few questions. We want to do this, then we can go for it, Cyrus.
Yeah, it's a straightforward one, but I just want to comment on one or two things before I ask my question. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Kalu, for hosting the space, and it's always a joy to listen to Kelvin. First and foremost, because I try to understand the whole thing going on, I think it's a good policy, the whole arrangement between Dangote and NNPC. But one of the things that that comes to mind is, why can't Dangote patronize the other IOCs, right? At least if you do that, you will edge against other external factors that are associated with importation, like the FOB, like the inspection fee, the financing cost fee, and all of those things. That's the first one. And then the other one is the issue of the legality of Dangote selling in dollars to the Nigerian downstream sector, because I am aware that the PIA stipulate that transaction in the upstream sector could be made in dollar or in Naira, right? So the IOCs, which are usually operated, not IOC, the upstream players usually operated by the IOC, the Shell, the Chevron, and others. And of course, we now have some indigenous players like Aradel, Seplat, and whatnot. But is it legal for Dangote to sell to Nigerians in dollar? Because if the PIA doesn't say anything about that, I think the PIA is silent about how transactions should be done in the midstream and the downstream sector. We then turn to the constitution of the country. We say all transactions should be done in Naira. So my question would be, is what Dangote doing now? What I don't think they've started it, but what they are planning to do, is that a constitutional thing to do? Is that a legal thing to do? I know it's trying to make against constitution and whatnot.
Virus. Dangote is in a free trade zone.
Yeah, but does that mean they can sell to Nigerians in dollars?
The FTZ regulations that was produced by NEBSA says that, and this was subject of hot debate at the public hearings during the tax reform bills that were being passed. The House has passed, Senate will pass this month of April. We're entering this week. There were talks about, should we increase the limit of what companies in the FTZ are allowed to sell to the custom area, or reduce it? Side of the argument, so let's take it to zero. Anything they sell to custom area should be taxable. The section said, no, let's increase it. At the end of the day, I think the House opted to keep it at 25%.
What does that mean?
I don't.
25% means what?
25% of whatever they sell to the custom area is not taxable.
Yeah, but what about the currency of trade now? The legal tender of
it's silent on that, because it's a free trade zone. So
I get that, but I don't think if an FTZ can say it's going to sell to Nigerians in dollars. That's where he can export, but I don't think he has that power, which is what Cyrus is asking.
No, so the FTZ regulations produced by NEBSA did not state, because a free trade zone is a free trade zone. If a company is in a free trade zone and it basically cannot, it's not subject to corporate income tax. It means that it's not in your custom territory. If it's not in your custom territory, it means that it's not subject to you saying that it cannot sell products in dollars. So, because a free trade zone is assumed not to be part of your area, custom area. So it's not subject to that particular rule of if it's allowed to sell in US dollar or Naira. And moreover, the FTC regulations did not silent on that. So I don't think he has a problem or is in conflict of breach of the law on that. No.
Well, we will see. We will see about that, Sarah. Sorry, did you have any follow-up question?
Yeah. So the question about Dangote patronizing indigenous base of IOCs in Nigeria, international oil traders that are operating in Nigeria to edge against import-based cost. I don't know whether you've addressed that. And the issue of just a minute, sir. The issue of free trade zone is about export, right? If you are selling your product and a free trade zone outside of that particular territory, you are subjected to the constitution of the country. You are subjected to all the laws that are binding, whether it's tax laws or constitutional law, whatever, that are binding transaction within that country. So, free trade zone does not.
Can you show me the part of the CBN Act that says that?
There's a law that says legal tender is Naira.
Like the part that says that applies to free trade zones that are outside of the custom area.
So when is he going to sell that oil to? He's going to bring it outside the truck.
It's a gray area. It was not couch. You have to be, in law, Kalu. you can't say that, because something is not there, is a gray area, there is in between, so you interpret it. It's a gray area. You have to be specific and say, look, companies in the FTZ are not allowed to sell to custom area except it's in Naira. You have to be very specific and couch it there. If it's not there, it's not there. It's a gray area. So he's not subject to it.
Okay, I understood.
On the question he asked about operators. So, I was mentioning about pre-export financing facility that some of the indigenous operators, members of IPPG, people who typically have operational expenses of between 100 and maybe 50 and 500 million dollars a year. Okay, they raise money from sometimes commodity trader, international commodity traders. Some of them, Vitol, Trafigura, Glencore, and the likes of them. They raise finance, and there are stabilization clauses in this. But then again, those clauses does not supersede the Petroleum Industry Act, because whatever clauses you have in a commercial agreement is not superior to the laws that govern the sector in which you operate. Okay? So, some of these operators will tell you, we already have off-take agreements, we have to pay back the money we borrowed until we're able to, reach break-evens. Sometimes we reach break-even, but they have off-take agreements, we already committed these cargoes. It's a failure of the regulator. NUPRC has not put its foot down and told the operators that, according to what sections 109 says, and based on the gazette we've developed, based on sections 109 of the PIA, that if you don't meet up with the quota for domestic refiners, you don't get export permits to lift products out of Nigeria. They've not done that. We've suggested it, but they've not done it. It's just what it is.
So, Kevin, is it that Dangote is finding it difficult to purchase from these players, these international traders? Is it that he can't just get crude from them? Is that the issue?
Cyrus, like I said, Dangote is not the government. It's a company. You can't compel them to do what the government should do. If the government refuses to say that this is what the PIA says, and you must, offer based on willing buyer, willing seller basis, products out of Nigeria, he doesn't get it. That's it. A lot of them will tell you they already have off-take agreements, they can't supply him. And sometimes, in order to frustrate him, they'll even tell him, we're going to route the cargoes through third-party traders who will now mark up commission of $35 a barrel. Imagine you're buying 1 million barrels of crude, a large container cargo, a LCC, at maybe $75, and they tell you that you have to add $3 million on that 1 million barrels. Does it make sense? And you have to find a way of adding that commission you pay to a third-party trader on behalf of the operator into your unit costs and price it in a way that you still make profits. Does it make sense?
All right. Kevin, let's just go a bit quicker. I just got two guys here, Bold and Malam, and then we'll just maybe go back to gas. So Malam, I've got Malam Batside, and I've got Bold. Malam, you've got the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, Kelvin. Thank you, Kalu. Sometimes you wonder if Kelvin is an economist or an engineer. He goes into, all these details about the, molecule and all of that. Yeah. But my own concern really is that I think, and this question is going to, is for you, Kelvin. So the foreign interest, I think that's what our problem is. We heard this story of Malta, and to be honest, I don't know what's going on in there. I actually feel that what is creating the tension between the government and Dangote is the fact that there are foreign interests that are benefiting. Sorry, just hang on a second. I'll land down. That are benefiting from importation of products with or without subsidy removal. That's number one. Number two is the fact that I think the most sensible thing anybody can do under the circumstance is to sell domestic, that 445,000 barrels per day domestic allocated crude in Naira. It is very simple. I can't find anything more straightforward than that. Because the domestic crude is actually expected to come from the crude that accrues when in PC from all their economic interests, from JV, from the PSC, and what have you, right? So this is more like using what we have to, at our own advantage. Everybody is doing it. US has a strategic petroleum reserve. Donald Trump is fighting everybody to make sure price of crude oil come down. He's talking to everybody. So what our own way of managing our what's it called is to use that domestic crude. So for me personally, I think the most sensible thing is to sell it in Naira. That way you remove the forex risk, and then you stabilize your economy. You see Naira coming as low as 1,000 or even below that, if we allow that to start. But my question really is, what is going on with Malta and all these foreign interests? Thank you.
Isn't it the opposite? Before Kevin answers, I think it's the opposite. If you sell in Naira, the Naira weakens, not strengthens. But Kevin would answer that. If you look at it this way, sir, when we sell in crude in dollar, we earn dollar. So the Naira strengthens because we are earning dollar. If you earn in Naira, the Naira will weaken because we are earning Naira.
Sorry, Kalu. Sorry, please. Sorry, just 1 second. No, 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. Don't worry. I would just give me 1 second. So, yes, I hear you. But you see, the issue is that normally what, I'm in the industry, so let me just give you full disclosure. So what we expect the government to be doing is to actually have, put more effort in terms of finding new reserves. As of last week, people were still discovering new fields, new blocks. And just ensure that we raise our volume. To address your point, we just need to substitute that 445,000 barrels that we're now going to find. Yes, I know that our export earnings will drop. And even if you look at it, the net effect of it, because we're going to add value to those crude oil products, the net effect of it is still positive, even based on your argument. So I still submit to you that even if you don't find a replacement volume that are going to give for local consumption, because we're going to add value.
No, I'm not arguing that. All I'm just saying, it's a very simple. No, I get you.
So the net effect of it is still positive. Yeah.
Kalu.
No, go ahead.
Kalu. So the domestic crude intervention stock used for is used to pay back loans mostly. NNPC says that some of it goes to their government-owned refineries, which I spoke about earlier. If Dangote has to buy crude in dollars, for example, and he has to import, to get the FX to do so, he's going to have to use his export earnings to swap byproducts. Okay, that export earnings would have come as balance of payment to CBN, as net export proceeds anyway. So it's just a replacement. Because if he buys crude in dollars by importing, the FX that he would have brought back to Nigeria as net export proceeds, which is more, by the way, because when you refine on a barrel of crude, what you get in terms of yield, a sweat barrel of crude, is way higher than what you get if you're exporting raw crude oil. Okay, so the net export proceeds he will bring by refining the crude and exporting the difference of what Nigeria consumes is more than what he will get if he was having to import the crude. Okay, that's one. Number two, if you give him the crude and he's able to satisfy the needs of Nigeria and Sections 317, 728 is obeyed, the crude oil NNPC uses to do for sale agreements for what they call vendor financing program, which was former DSDP, OPA, and the likes of them. That crude oil, you sell the dollar, remit the dollar back to Nigeria, because that crude oil is what they used to swap to bring in products into Nigeria. So, on a balance of scale, if you look at it, you ask yourself, that crude intervention stock, what do they actually use the money for? When that crude is sold, an official price that for the longest time has actually been below open market rates, the money, does it actually come to Consolidated Revenue Fund, less NNPC's retained earnings, less Frontier Basin Exploration Fund, which brings the government about net of 70%? Does it actually come to CRF? For the longest time, for a long time, it has not been coming. Throughout last year, I think until, it was not until November last year that the CRF saw money from NNPC that was profit oil.
I mean,
All through from
the data is clear now.
They didn't see any.
Kevin, data is clear. Emefiele said we had no remittance from the NNPC for 3 years. This is Emefiele, the former CBN governor. If you notice, when Tinubu came to office,
which was the foundation of his problems.
Yes, and then if you notice, when President Tinubu came to office, he put the NNPC under the CBN. So the NNPC lost the what's it called? They had to report the remittances through CBN. NNPC lost their independence. So and again, I'm not making it's not an argument. If you sell Nigerian crude oil and you earn Naira, that means that you are buying Naira and selling dollar. The Naira will fall. It's not an argument. If you sell the Nigerian crude in dollar, the Naira will go up. It's not argument. It's just pure trading.
Yeah, but Carl is debatable. So let me explain why. So you look at present current data. Dangote has changed the export-import dynamics of our economy. So I think the latest NBS data showed that Nigeria brought in more refined petrol than exporting crude in value terms. And I was trying to understand also that, according to Kevin's analysis, so for example, it also reduces the pressure. I get what you're saying, that we might not earn more FX, but are you not looking at the margin, the spread at the end of the day? Because remember that one of the problems facing the Nigerian economy is that we export commodities. Dangote most likely will bring in higher margins because now we are exporting refined petroleum products. So the argument that because we are selling crude in Naira, because might not, it looks a bit.
The problem is that Olimide is that we can print Naira. The Naira is depreciating. We don't print dollar. The dollar is stable. Even today, the dollar is appreciating. It's stable. So when we take crude oil that is priced in the dollar terms and we tell to anybody, we say this dollar, the opportunity cost is the dollar. The cost in economics, the cost.
Carlo, what about the opportunity cost of what the market takes in terms of FX to import the products.
No, but yeah, that's stage 2, Mr. Kelvin.
Yes, but
The point is that the cost of that crude oil that Dangote is paying for in economics is the dollar you've lost. That's the cost, not the Naira.
But you know the problem with that argument is that Kevin has said that Dangote is not getting a discount, so he's even getting the Naira. He's getting at the equivalent of the dollar. So it's not like we are getting Dangote has that advantage. So I get what you're saying.
So which is my point. Cancel the whole thing. That's why I asked him. I said, should we just cancel the whole thing? Get Dangote to pay in dollars. Listen, again, remember, Dangote is exporting.
Dangote to pay in dollars. Our FX market is fragile.
No, Dangote exports. Dangote exports the.
Where does he want to get the dollars from?
From the exports of the byproducts.
That's the point exactly, Carlo. Number one, he has USD obligations to pay. Number one.
But he's exporting.
The export of the products that he's supposed to bring export proceeds. If he uses it to buy crude oil offshore and ship to Nigeria, where will you get net export proceeds to do balance of payment that he'll submit back?
His exports of aviation fuel to the US.
And it doesn't matter. He has FX obligation, Carlo. He has FX obligation.
Which is earning back from the exports of aviation fuel to the US.
Yes, but you need to understand that he will prioritize creditors before looking at. He has prioritized settling creditors.
Okay.
And according to Bloomberg, one of the problems he has recently, and that was why he had to forgo the relationship with Fitch Ratings, which has also kind of increased his cost of borrowing. So I think it makes more sense, Carlo, to be honest, that if the arrangement is at the market rate, because it's not really getting a discount. I don't see our FX market cannot support.
So I agree with Malam. See, Malam's point, just to be clear, I agree with Malam's point that Dangote should pay in Naira. If Dangote got the total crude oil that he needs, he refines, he gets the total oil in crude, he refines, and the export is best for Nigeria. The point I am making is that if he's not getting that crude oil from NNPC, why then allow him to pay why do half? Give him the oil in Naira, or tell him no, pay for the 100,000 barrels in crude oil in dollar, export your aviation fuel to the US, earn your dollar there, do your net off. Give him the crude oil in Naira, let him then export and do net off. But this way, we're not accounting right. We're not doing the proper accounting. Kevin has already told us he's not getting the crude oil that he needs. He's importing crude oil. With which dollars? Our dollars, right? He's exporting crude oil. He's making aviation fuel in dollars as well. It's not adding up. NNPC is exporting crude oil. NNPC is borrowing out crude oil to earn dollars. It's not adding up. We have to take a composite view on this. NNPC, Dangote cannot be siloed. We have to look at it in composite. That's why we have a coordinating minister of the economy that will say what's the net going outflow, the net inflow, and what is best for Nigeria. In one way, NNPC is borrowing and Dangote is also exporting. And then one guy is borrowing in dollar, one guy is exporting in dollar. That's why we have TSA. Because in the past, Ministry of Aviation will borrow from Zenith Bank. Then the same Ministry of Aviation will give Zenith Bank deposit. It doesn't make any sense. So clean this thing up. I clean it up. Like Malam is saying, if he's not getting his crude oil from NNPC, then treat him like a preferred buyer. Give him, okay, you can pay us in 90 days or 1 year. The Naira is not the least subsidy. Give him a time subsidy. Pay us for the crude oil in 2 years. That's also a subsidy. But pay in dollars. I'm not an expert, so I'll leave it to you. I'm just talking the currency side. The currency side says if he pays in Naira, the Naira will lose value. It's a currency argument. That's just all I'm saying.
The argument.
Sorry, I don't know if I can comment briefly. I just wanted to chip something. Sorry.
Okay. So if you look at Kevin, that's why I kept quiet, because for you to have a functional FX market environment, your derivative market must be liquid, and you don't even have a liquid spot market. You just need to look at FX market transaction on FMDQ or CBN. You just need to look at how disastrous it is. A meme coin has higher trading volume than Nigeria's FX market. Is that the market you want Dangote to run Because see, he opened a trading office in London. I hope you are aware, and he is also edging. He is definitely on top of his game in terms of FX exposure, swaps, commodity. Is definitely on top of his game. My only problem is that the government and the CBN, rather than giving PTCs holidays, all these needless 10,000 FX, because what Dangote is doing in the petrol economy, it has a lot of spontaneous effect on the economy. I think the CBN really has to come up with providing market makers, because it's a shame a country of 220 million cannot have a daily volume, FX daily volume of $100 million. It's a big shame, Carlo, because that's the problem. Dangote's business is too big for the Nigerian economy, and that's what we fail to realize. How do you want him to run a derivative business when the market is as liquid as all these heavy, lightly floated stocks?
Let Malam speak and we'll go back to Kevin. Malam, you.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to say that no matter what, where this our argument lands, I think that it is not correct that we're still importing PMS when we have a 650,000 barrels per day facility.
Simple.
So I think we should stop that. No matter how we can find a way to solve the problem and balance it, whatever the numbers look like, but I think we should stop. So please, I really need an answer to this question. What is this Malta story? I mean, the thing just fizzled out. Do we know where is that story now, and who are the interests that are promoting those entities?
Yeah, Kevin, that's for you. Why are we importing? I mean, that's a basic question Nigeria wants to know. Why is Nigeria still importing PMS when we have a refiner that can have 60,000 barrels a day? Why?
Thank you very much. So, what you see, and this was exactly what I was speaking to earlier about product specification and quality assurance section 11 of the PIA, and the allowable limit for sulfur that ECOWAS came to in 2020 before COVID lockdown started. And the reason why the petroleum industry around the world is highly regulated. It's very, very highly regulated because products are very sensitive, chemicals. So it's very highly regulated. There are standards, very stringent standards that guide markets around the world. I've noticed that for Africa, mostly Africa, because you don't see the same thing operates in most of the Middle East. For mostly Africa, they dump low quality products, high sulfur, low octane. The reason why in 2022 you had people's engines knocking was because the octane they brought was so low, like method what they call the anti-knocking ratio. Some people came up with the idea that, listen, they'll go to refineries in Kazakhstan, Russia, buy dross. Dross is defected petrol that has very high sulfur level of over 7,000 ppm. Okay? They'll buy dross. They will send it to blending plants. Malta has perfected our business of blending. And then they'll transship it. Transship it means that the vessel with which it came to from Eastern Europe to Central Europe is not the same vessel that it will come. So when you're tracking the ship, you won't see that, it came from XYZ location, and you can say, okay, you got this kind of spec of product and you're bringing it here. So you cure it. You cure methanol, cure with condensates. When the curing process reduces the level of sulfur in the petrol, you bring it down to maybe below 30,000, below 2,000 ppm. Sometimes, if they're lucky, to below 1,005, but it never drops below 800. Mind you, the allowable limit for sulfur in Nigeria was 50 when that convention finished in 2020. Then it was increased to 200 by Nigeria, NMDPRA. That expired December last year. It's back to 50. So if, for example, you're bringing in high sulfur petrol that is cheap, you're making a wide margin between your landing costs and the actual cost of the petrol. Not all the marketers that import in the area, not all of them, but I'll tell you, anywhere around 40% of the products that are imported into Nigeria are blended. So this comes back to the regulator. What's the job of the regulator? Does NMDPRA have a lab? They don't. They don't have a lab. They give it to third-party vendors whose,
Yeah, but Kevin, I just think that we want to get the. Why are we importing crude oil? Are you saying we're importing crude oil because of high sulfur? I mean, we want to know.
Are you talking about PMS or crude oil?
PMS. Why, if Dangote is existing, why is Nigeria still? Why is it even discussing importing any PMS whatsoever? If we have Dangote and local players.
Kalu, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, it's a question I ask myself too. Then you have to ask yourself, what's the incentive for continuing imports? Number one, when you import blended products, the margin you make for bringing in blended products, so the landing cost you claim that everybody else brings in imported PMS in Nigeria, it's not the same. The margins are high. Okay? Number two, I don't want to go into some specifics, but it's a way to round trip money. I don't want to go because going into some specifics will require me to mention things I don't want to mention.
Okay.
It's a way to round trip and do money laundering.
Okay, but his own question again, let's go to Malta. So this Malta thing. Okay, is this part of the you don't want to mention names? So we just move on from Malta and go into gas now.
I don't want to mention names, but
okay.
Also you know, like I said earlier, okay, people have built businesses, spend billions building bulk storage terminal for throughputs. They make about $2 per metric ton, just for you keeping your products at their terminal, okay, which is what you call a depot, which is the basis for which some people formed an association called Depot Owners, Depot Association, Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria. How do they call it? I don't know. But that was the basis on which they formed that association. It's a big business. Importation business is the only business some people have been used to. They import. Some of them have retail businesses spread around Nigeria.
Okay.
So it's new to them that they are going to have to break their existing business model that they have been known for years, that they've built around, and say, we're now going to switch to taking products from Dangote, stop our import business, exhume all our foreign credit lines, and then operate on margins that are lower than the margins they usually get from importing.
Okay, is this a surprise to them? I mean, is this a surprise that Dangote was building a refinery?
Carlo, I've said this several times, but not many people believed he was going to be able to pull it off. They didn't plan for him to succeed. He didn't.
Okay, so if I'm the president and I have this is a how many $billion refinery sitting in Nigeria, and you say he doesn't have home support, or how can a 15 billion investment not have home support?
Carlo, the questions you're asking me, I'm also asking these questions.
because if you look at the world, if you Google the world today, you cannot count on your hand 15 billion projects, like, or in a single place. Like, Even in China, how many? How many $20 billion projects does China, US, EU have? EU as a continent have? How many does China have? How many does the US have? So it's I get it. Like, if I don't like somebody, but he has a fine sister, I'll like him. So how is it that Nigeria cannot say, listen, this God has blessed us with a $20 billion refinery. Let's put everything aside, and this helps my economy. From the president, my deficit goes down, my imports fall, my exports go up, my GDP goes up, my employment goes up. The Dangote refinery has no drawback. There is no economic drawback from Dangote refinery. There are only Dangote positives. Why fight it?
Can I tell you something? Today, the refinery has power generation plant installed capacity of 500 megawatts. Based on what they are doing today, the refinery, the power generation plant, is currently generating 435 megawatts today as we speak. 435. I can tell you that refinery and the fertilizer plant, the urea plant, combined, they're not using up to 300 megawatts. I'll put it at maybe 225, 240. Which means that he has excess capacity of anywhere around 200 megawatts to sell to Lagos. The entire Lagos, Kalu, 3,500 and about 27 square meters, is not consuming more than 1,100 megawatts.
It's a joke.
Kalu, the Minister of Power has not visited that refinery to say, okay, you're producing, you have installed capacity of 435. Sorry, installed capacity of 500. You're doing 435. You have excess capacity of about 200. Can we ring fence it and either do a PPA to a Genco or give you a Genco? I think for you to get a Genco license, if I'm not, the power experts will say maybe 500 megawatts minimum, if I'm not mistaken. Either do a PPA or give you a Genco license so that you can be selling
to Lekki. Just sell Lekki
capacity to the Lagos grid. The Minister of Power has not gone there. He has not gone there.
Wow.
Number 1 point, Kalu. Number 2 points. Dangote has installed capacity for urea of 3 million metric tons per annum. The gas he gets from Chevron through NGC, it's about horizontal. It's a horizontal structure. It's about 50 to 60% of what he needs. So, at full capacity, if you multiply the price of a metric ton of urea, which is about between $380 and $400 per metric ton, by about 3 million tons per annum, at full capacity, you can generate $2.2 billion from just selling urea. So that's a low-hanging fruit. That's $1 billion on the table that the government is not taking because he can't get enough gas that he needs to actually produce urea.
Damn.
I just wanted to chip in those points.
Okay, this is a good segue. I know I have Bold. Bold, if I make your question real quick, I'm going to go into gas because now we're talking about gas. Bold, do you have a question real quick? Then I can go back to Kevin on gas. Bold going once. Kevin, this is a good segue. Let's talk about the gas infrastructure in Nigeria. I'm not a gas guy, but I know there's gas in the south. There are power plants in the southwest. There's a pipeline going from the south through Ajaokuta to the north. Talk to me about our gas infrastructure. People have said Nigeria is a country that has little oil and a lot of gas. Why are we not maximizing this to our benefit?
So, the focus over time has been on associated gas, AG, which is the gas you get when you drill crude, the gas that comes out, you trap it, and you go through all the process of aggregation, treating, separation, and the likes of them. Nigeria has not focused on non-associated gas. So I mentioned that in 1999, SNEPCO the upstream arm of Shell, the arm that still remains in Nigeria after they sold SPDC. They drilled 3,000 meters in the upper Benue Trough in Bauchi, and they found gas, about 3 billion scuff. They abandoned it because then nobody in Nigeria was talking about gas. Nobody knew that in 2025, gas was going to be called a transition fuel, and LNG was going to be a big deal. I think 1999 was around the same time when NLNG was just coming on. They were building their train 1, 2, and 3. So nobody was talking about gas. What everybody was focused on was crude. So most of the gas that you get from drilling crude was flared. So if you drill a well and you find more gas than oil, you cap it and you leave it. So SNEP could drill 3,000 meters in the upper Benue Trough in Bauchi. They found gas and they left it. Now, the challenge is you have what they call domestic gas delivery obligations, sections 108 of the PIA. Then you have the willing producers price part, which is the export markets. So you have 2 pricing models in Nigeria for gas. And for me, this is the foundation and basis of the problem you have with not enough capacity, supply of gas to the markets and all the problems NLNG is having. Under the DGDO, the government placed a national reference quote that places a cap for you calculating the domestic base price of gas. So if, for example, gas-based industries are supplying to the Gencos at $2.18, less all their transportation fees and fees in between, then you're supplying to the other GBIs at $2.48, less the other associated charges. The willing producers price part might be double or more than that, for example. I'm just giving an example. So, based on the law, there's a percentage of gas that's supposed to be supplied to the domestic market and percentage to the willing producers price, the export markets. Now, the operators are saying that, number one, onshore, there's a problem of vandalization of pipes, which affects the supply. There's a problem of lack of proper pricing. So if, for example, it costs us more to trap the gas, aggregate it, treat it, before we pipe it, than it costs, then we get as revenues that comes in from selling the gas. What incentive do we have? So the companies will rather what they call, when the gas comes out, instead of flaring the gas, they reject it. Or if they flare it, they pay penalties. There's a framework for penalties for flaring gas in Nigeria. They pay penalties to NUPRC for flaring gas. So for them, it's cheaper for them to pay penalties or reject it than it is for them to go through that process of investing in infrastructure to trap, aggregate, treat, and then take it to a manifold to pipe it to the market. So they've been complaining that, listen, can we show the government how pricing is limiting our ability to supply more gas to the markets in Nigeria? Mr. President is not exactly, willing to, because of politics, because, it's a very tough position to be in. If they increase the prices of gas to Gencos, price of electricity will go up. Price of electricity goes up, everybody starts shouting. Politically, it will reduce its points, and I can understand where he's coming from. But on the other hand, if it doesn't allow for them to increase the prices of gas to GBIs, Gencos, they will pay penalties for flaring, they will reject, they will supply what the Gencos need, there will be no light. It still doesn't score political points. It still gets reduced points because it still comes back to the problem of Mr. President can't solve electricity problem. Now, Nestle is very complicated. Supplying gas to Gencos is one of many problems. I don't want to go into the other issues because it will derail us. Okay? Now let's come to the export markets. Why is NLNG not getting the gas it needs? Recently, you saw the judgment from that Tavares got in a court in London, arbitration court in London. 2020, yes, pre-sold 19 cargoes to Glencore and Vitol, $380 million. 260 to Glencore, 120 to Vitol, if I'm not mistaken. And NLNG did not keep up with their end because of force majeure. And, you know, Tavares said that it's a breach of commercial terms, even if external factors prevented it from keeping up with the side of the agreement. They went to court in 2020. Late 2020, I think, they won. NLNG appealed to 2021. Early this year, they won the appeal. And that is going to set NLNG back by $380 million if there's no transfer risk insurance, because usually companies take transfer risk insurance so that just in case they have this kind of judgment debts, insurance will pay for it. So if there's no transfer risk insurance on that judgment debt, it means that $380 million will be deducted from the dividends that the shareholders get. Any Total, Shell, and the Nigerian government, of which NNPC is a beneficial owner on behalf of the federal government of Nigeria. So you have the issue of vandalization. Today, they do about 4.5 billion scuff. NLNG takes 2.5. That has dropped because of issues. You saw TMP, Seplat, what they took from Shell, SPDC. Vandalization of pipes, not enough AG. I wouldn't say they have pricing issues because export falls under willing producers price part. But then in shallow waters and in offshore, there isn't infrastructure, to pipe that gas from those FSOs, from those fields offshore, down to NLNG, to aggregate it and bring it in. Okay? ExxonMobil and Chevron is not in NLNG because as at the time when LNG was coming up, the Americans were not interested in gas. Americans only came into gas in the last maybe 12, 13 years. Okay, so it was Total, Eni, Shell. So Chevron mostly takes its gas through an export pipeline to West African Gas Pipeline Company, ECOWAS, and then supplies the Nigerian markets also. Chevron supplies Dangote with gas.
So Kevin, if we are you saying if we increase the pricing per gas, we would get more investment and there will be more gas usage in Nigeria? Is it to do with the pricing?
On that DGDO, on that domestic gas delivery obligation, because there are two markets there that are partitioned. There's the domestic market, there's the export market. There are different pricing models. The pricing model for the export market works because it falls under what they call a willing producers price part, WPPP. The pricing model for the domestic market is not working because the government has capped it. And the operators are saying that if the law requires that a percentage of what we produce goes to the domestic market under that price that the government has capped it at, we're not willing to do it. Because it doesn't work for us. We're not making money. We're making money under export, but we're not making money under domestic gas delivery obligations that the PIA specifies in Section 108 that we should provide. So, here's the deal, Carlo. Here's the deal. You have to invest in infrastructure to aggregate and pipe that gas mainland to land, to manifolds. Okay? But now you have a problem. The oil and gas sector is a little complicated. You have a problem. The problem is that in shallow waters, and mostly offshore, under the PIA, the operators are not recognized. NNPC is the ultimate owner of the gas. That's the problem. It's a big problem. Because they're like, why would you have NNPC as the ultimate owner of the gas and you're expecting us to invest in gas? It doesn't make any sense. Because they without their approval, we can't structure any gas supply purchase agreement, any GSP, with anybody. Either floating LNG or NLNG or whatever we want to do, or export pipeline. We can't do it. Unless NNPC approves it, we can't do it. So they are saying they're not going to invest until that particular clause in the commercial terms for gas offshore is addressed, and the government is not willing to address it.
Okay, so is there any Nigerian industrial complex? I know Lagos has the one in the Ikeja uses gas. Is there any other massive industrial complex that uses gas in Nigeria? Transamadi does, right? Ikeja does. Is there any other we can point to and say we're manufacturing, we're using gas, costs are lower? Is there anything like this in Nigeria?
No, are you talking about processing gas or...
No, using like how we have Maturi Industrial Estate, we have the Ikeja Industrial Estate, using local Nigerian gas.
Your answer is Dangote.
Apart from Dangote.
Gas. So you have the Shagamu industrial layout, for example. They have pipes. Axela has done a good job. Axela was the gas unit that was spawned out of the one that sold that business. They have pipeline infrastructure. They're providing gas to quite a number of companies around that axis that needs it, both for power, IPP, and some other uses. I'm aware that Nestle, the Shagamu Industrial Layout, actually runs on gas. Quite a number of companies.
Yeah, but
there are quite a number of other gas-based industries. Lekki Free Trade Zone, Papa, that actually use gas as a feedstock.
Okay.
Ceramics. So it's not just for power. Glass fabrication, ceramics. Indorama uses gas. Notora uses gas, but Indorama and Notora and River State, they're not in Lagos.
Okay.
And now, and the reason why I've been singing about gas is because other than the northeast, the northeast and the southeast are the only two regions in Nigeria that does not have pipeline infrastructure.
What does that mean? Break that down for me.
That means that if you look at the power generation, they have the lowest power generation of every other region in Nigeria. Check data from NEC, you see, so it's not like I'm lying. Check NEC data. The generation capacity in the southeast and the northeast are the lowest, because 75% of the gencos in Nigeria are thermal plants that run on gas. So if you don't have pipeline infrastructure that runs through it, and you don't have pressure metering and reduction stations, you're toast.
But Imo State has a lot of gas. I can understand Northeast has no gas, so they have no gas pipelines. Imo, Abia have gas. Why don't they have gas pipelines in those gas captive areas?
So, the infrastructure you have for gas, including the one that connects with Obitore that someone was mentioning the other day, Obigbo, Aba, I think Enugu, from Enugu then it goes to Ajaokuta, because by road you basically go from Enugu
Nsukka and all that.
Nsukka, you go to Benue.
Yeah.
And then you enter into Kogi, Ajaokuta, but by pipe through the River Niger, which is what they are trying to cross, 1.8 kilometers, and they've not been able to cross in 2 years. The pipe takes gas away from River States and Abia States and Imo States to Ajaokuta. It doesn't keep gas in the southeast.
Why?
I'm asking this question too, and I was privileged to speak at the cabinet retreat of the Abia State government on the invitation of His Excellency last month, and I spoke about the subject. I'm asking the same question in meetings. Why is there no emphasis on commissioning FID for pipeline infrastructure in the southeast and in the northeast, and not just in the southeast, so that folks don't say it's because the southeast has gas. The northeast, however, will need you to invest in wells that the reservoir only has gas, because they have more gas deposits than oil in the northeast. The only other alternative is to branch AKK, because the design for AKK is Ajaokuta, which is an aggregation point, to Abuja, Gwagwalada, the PMRS in Gwagwalada, then to Kaduna, then to Kano, Then it goes northwest to Gausu in Zamfara. Yeah? Then it's supposed to connect from Kano for TNGP straight through Niger Republic to Algeria if they build that export pipeline. But I don't know if they will ever come to it.
Okay, but Kevin,
they can extend that drawing, that engineering drawing from Kano to the northeast. But there's no plan to do that.
For now, okay. But can a state government do this gas capture? Like, if is it only federal, or can a state say, okay, we have some gas marginal wells here or gas pipelines here, we're going to drill gas?
Kalu, a state government cannot, because NNPC controls multi-product pipelines in Nigeria, which is exactly what I was saying earlier. The state government cannot. Okay, NNPC controls all the pipeline infrastructure. If they decide that they don't want to do it, there's nothing the state government can do about it.
Speechless. So
which is the reason why I said they need to move from a closed loop. Closed loop means that they control it. It's an open access. Okay? Ibe Kachuku came up with an engineering design and said that, okay, they were going to do 121 kilometers in the southeast. You know, it's in the gas master plan. Where is it? They've not commissioned. They say, that they over leverage. They don't have money. They don't have the leverage to borrow money, you know, for a new project. AKK is stalling. They've invested $1.5 billion. You know, They are going to 2, which comes to about $30.2 million per kilometer, which is ridiculous, by the way, per kilometer of gas pipeline when you benchmark to the prices of building gas pipelines around the world. Okay? So if you're over leveraged, why don't you do an open access or a PPP where you bring players in to fund these projects and share in the pipeline transportation fees?
Okay, and last question for you on this pipeline thing. I know states also don't have the power to build airports. Airports are federal, but states build airports all over the place. So you are saying that the state government cannot do its own pipeline the same way state governments build airports.
Carlo, NNPC controls the multi-product pipeline, and I'm saying to you again that the states cannot build gas pipelines.
I'm just saying, if I have a marginal,
like River State or Bayelsa State or Delta State or Akwa, they cannot build a crude oil transmission pipeline.
No, I hear you, but what if I have a well that if I drill my own well, not with the NNPC pipeline, I drill my own well, there's gas, I can't tap it, pipe it.
You don't have mineral rights.
Margin. So if a private sector guy can't do this, so. Oh, okay. Let's go to questions. Afribull, you've got the floor. I don't want to talk because I don't want to look at like. Afri, go ahead. If you can hear me, your audio is very low. The echo is crazy.
Can you hear me?
No, I can't hear you. Can you mute your mic? So Afri, hold up, let me just mute him. I'm muting you. So Afri, I've muted you. Fix your mic. There's an echo, and we can't hear your native audio. Let's get to Eze Omoreji. Go ahead. Eze. Let's go to Jesus. Well, XI is it? Is that X on XI speaker? You've got the floor. Please go ahead. Guys, if you request to speak, you got to stay on the mic because we add you, but you don't speak. So, Eze, I'm taking you off. XI, ready to speak on the at Ruchi XI, taking you off. Nehemiah Habila, sorry, taking Eze off. Lumde, you can hear me, right? Lumde, just making sure folks can hear me. Lumde, you can hear me, correct? Lumde, can you hear me? Kevin, can you hear me?
Yes, Carlo, I can hear you.
Okay. Nehemiah, you've got the floor. Go ahead and speak. Where are they all? They all request and they're not available to speak. Okay. Afribull, are you trying to speak? If you can, go ahead.
Hear me?
Yes, I can. Perfect. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just a quick question for Kelvin. We have the Network Transport Gas Code, and that is a set of guiding regulation regarding transportation of gas in Nigeria. And I wanted to, my first question is why that isn't being implemented, or is it currently being discussed in any manner or form? And then secondly, not to disclose some other private things, but I'm aware NNPC is still currently trying to raise capital for some abandoned pipeline projects. There's a huge deficit, of course, as you touched on. What is their prospect of even, well, I can give some feedback on some investors' perspective. There's not that much interest. But with the current, even at the current debt levels, NNPC is still actively trying to raise money for pipeline infrastructure. Maybe make some commentary on that.
Thanks so much.
So the network transportation access code is not being implemented for the same reason that the NMDPRA does not know how to create regulation for transfer pricing for the midstream sector in Nigeria. For the same reason that it doesn't know what to do with transiting people who import products to, actually operating a refinery model where you refine, satisfy your domestic market and exports. For the same reason, the NUPRC has not enforced DCSO guidelines, So the laws are there. The laws are there. The laws are, however, not unfollowed. Okay? So you have the network access codes framework, but is it being implemented? They still operate a closed loop. There's a subsidiary of NNPC that owns all the multi-product pipeline infrastructure. If you don't transit from a closed loop to an open access and attracts the players to come in, this model where you go and you say, you want to bring in capital to invest in these projects, and when the financiers come and look at your financial model and they say your cost per kilometer is ridiculous, outrageous, because they've done it for cheaper in other parts of the world. For example, you can imagine Sinopec. This so CMPC built a 1,950 kilometer pipeline from what's the name of the fields now in Niger Republic to Benin Republic, Semen. If you ask CMPC, they will tell you it cost them less than $1 million to build 1 kilometer. But Nigeria is building it for $30.2 million. How do you expect them to finance it for you? That's one. Number two, the fact that they are using their retained earnings to finance pipeline infrastructure, and they are at 1.5 billion for AKK and they are going to 2, shows you that that's the only way you can justify inflated EPC for those projects. So is there a case of, we don't want transparency in EPC to, if you actually operate an open access model and you bring in operators to do a PPP with you and you share in pipeline transportation fee, the cost of EPC is going to come down significantly. Is that the case? I don't know. I didn't get the second question, if you don't mind.
He was, yeah.
Hello?
Afri, will go for it. He said your second question.
Yeah, so my second question was, I'm aware on good word that NNPC is still attempting to raise capital for a couple of these pipeline projects, the AKK and some others in the south. I don't know if you have, I have myself some feedback from investors who are really interested for some of the reasons you mentioned. I was wondering what you think their prospects are solving that deficit and trying to fix those. Because the gas system, there's no interest in investors to fill that gap.
Your voice is gone very faint. I heard what you said, that they are trying to raise capital for some of the pipeline projects. Then
that's what he was saying. But if you have any insight on them trying to raise that they want to raise more capital for the pipelines, the AKK and the rest. So
they are over leveraged. They operate a vertical model. They don't have crude oil barrels to. How are they raising money for AKK? They're raising money through retained earnings. Okay, I think I am aware that Exim Bank and Sinosure was supposed to provide like a guarantee for the money Exim was supposed to provide for AKK. They pulled out because of EPC cost. Okay? And they said, okay, you know what, we'll do this by ourselves. How are they raising the money they're using for AKK? It's retained earnings. Okay, so if you put in so much money, you've not been able to cross the river Niger, AKK is not functioning, you're not piping gas, and you're not paying down on the finance that you've raised or you're using, where are you going to raise it from? They don't have. I mentioned earlier, I talked about the fact that they've gotten a syndicate for 5.5 or 7.5 of loan, the fresh loan they want to collect for budget support for the Nigerian government. Maybe some parts will be used for, field development costs to develop new fields that they have that they want to operate. NEPL wants to operate through service contracts. Where are they going to get the leverage to be able to borrow more money? They're over leveraged.
Quick question.
They don't have the free barrels.
Yeah, Kelvin, that project.
So if you don't have it and you're not willing to change your model to an open access and use a PPP to bring in operators to do this pipeline project through the network access code, then I don't see how they are going to make any significant progress with increasing the amount of multi-product pipeline, especially for gas that you have in Nigeria, even for exports.
Okay, fantastic. If you want to ask a question and you can't get the mic, just send me a DM, right? Bumi, you've got the floor, Bumi. Thanks, Afribo. Appreciate you. Bumi, you've got the floor.
Always.
Yeah.
Good evening, Kelvin. Good evening, Kalu. Good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, my question has to do with electricity. We have states being given regulatory control over electricity. So for a state like Lagos, what should we really expect? Will gas impede our expectation in getting regular supply of electricity? And I'm talking as a business owner that owns a garment manufacturing company. So I'm really interested in this to know what should be our expectation so that we can actually manage our expectation as far as having a regular and steady power supply.
Good question.
Yes, thank you.
Madam, good evening. Very important question you asked. So, Madam wants to take me back to the problems of Nessie, and I was trying to avoid it. Madam, I'm aware that your business is in Lagos. I spoke earlier about the fact that Dangote has excess capacity, for power. And the minister, you expect that the Minister of Power will visit him and sit down and discuss, okay, excess, how do we ring-fence it? Do you want a PPA with a Genco, or do you want us to give you a Genco license? And even encourage him, do you want to actually increase the installed capacity of for power, for generation that you have at the refinery? That has not happened. So it makes us believe. Lagos is trying to build a super grid. To be honest, to be fair, I think Lagos is going to be the first state in Nigeria to do it, of all the states. I think they are the only state that have shown any seriousness about developing a framework for building a super grid. Grid capacity is important, and the reason why it's not only important to decentralize the national grid and also increase the grid is because not all the power generated by the Gencos are actually taken by the discos. Two reasons. Number one, a lot of the discos don't have the financial capacity to take all the powers that the market operator gives to them. All the load, and not power, the load that market operator gives to them. They don't have the financial capacity to take it. They're supposed to provide the bank guarantee to market operator that if you want XYZ amount of load, you have a bank guarantee that will cover for the load that's been given to you. They reject load a lot of times. If you ask them, they'll tell you. Or if you ask people who are experts in power, they will confirm this to you. Number two, the transmission company of Nigeria, they have outdated infrastructure. So if, I'm just giving an example, the Gencos produce a total of 6,000 megawatts. Carlo, I can assure you, no more than 4,250 of that is actually transmitted to the grid. Why? There isn't infrastructure. The Gencos are being owed about 4.2 trillion naira, if I'm not mistaken. The Gencos are owing on gas because they are being owed by the market operator. And the market operator is owing the Gencos because the discos have shortfall, ATC and C losses. Okay? And that's also because people who are on prepaid are not only stealing electricity. Electricity theft is a major problem in Nigeria. It's a major problem. There's also the issue of the fact that only about maybe 46 or 47% of the people who use electricity from discos in Nigeria are actually on prepaid. Most of them are on estimated billing. And there's a lot of theft that comes with that. So Nessie has a problem. And for me, the solutions are number one. You have to address the issue of pricing for gas delivery to Gencos, number one. Number two, you have to privatize TCN so that private operators can invest in the infrastructure they need to transmit load from the Gencos to the market operator and discos. Number three, you have to go on a national campaign for increasing the level of adoption of prepaid meters around Nigeria.
Okay, but Kevin, just for her, right? For Bumi, I mean, she's doing her budget for 2025, maybe 2026. With Lagos doing this super grid, is it going to bring her cost lower? Should she be expectant of that?
Madam, I wouldn't bank on the government, because I'm not saying, like I said, Lagos is going to be the first state that will, do anything meaningful with electricity power in Nigeria. They're going to be the first. Also because, you have serious operators, Gencos, around the southwest, that mean business. And some of them have installed capacity. They're building infrastructure. Some of them already have it running. And also because the state government was the first to provide a framework for bringing the operators and, stakeholders to the table. So I don't think this will be achieved in 2025. I don't think so.
26, 27? 26, 27?
For me, I would suggest Madam should invest heavily on setting up solar.
Hey.
Go to China, buy solar panels and batteries.
So what's the point of the super grid if Madam cannot have lower power in 6, 7?
I'm being realistic. Because diesel cost is prohibitive. So your margins are just going to go off.
No, because Kevin, if there's any question, we should spend time on this. What Madam is asking. People are asking now. Well, I'm an SME. I'm hearing these laws, guidelines. I'm hearing these things, but I won't just make goods to sell. Nigerians don't have money. So if I reduce my cost, Nigerians can buy more. I can employ more people. Power is 30% or more of her cost. So you are telling her that in the next 24, 36 months, there is no way she can, apart from, like you said, invest in solar, which is capex, there is no way her native power cost is going to fall in a city that has the most sophisticated grid in Nigeria, connected with gas.
They've not built the grid yet. They're just talking about it.
That's why.
Okay, they've not built it. Okay,
Kelvin, if I may come in, you also have about 2 IPP plants in Lagos. Are they? What then is their capacity? Because the business community, my business is located. We are talking with an IPP company, but they are not really forthcoming. And when we ask them about places, where they're actually doing well, what they supply, they just want us to accept the fact that there will be.
Yeah.
Madam, so under the captive energy framework of the National Electricity Regulatory Commission, there's a cap of, I think, 1 megawatt, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think they've raised it up. I am an advocate for them to raise the captive energy framework for IPPs. I'm also of the opinion that the next thing is to look at a framework through which it can, have people sell excess capacity to the grid, to rotate, load. and balance load. That will also help the grid. You know,
Okay.
so I don't think that you're going to see any remarkable improvement. You know, one of the reasons why the power sector into this goes into bands is because they realize that the cost of what people are paying for power is just not going to cut it, and they needed to ring fence the load to people who can pay the market rates, which is, in my opinion, anywhere between 220 and 250 naira per unit. Even if people are going to cost me on this space. So the reality is that you just need to rely on producing your own power for now.
Madam, I tried.
You tried. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. All right, let's get Eze Chikwelu. Yeah, thank you so much. Eze Chikwelu, real quick. We're rounding up, so let's get questions for you.
Yeah, Carl, thanks. Everybody, I agree. Kelvin, good. Kelvin, this is my opportunity to ask you this question. Sorry, it sounds as if it may sound as if I'm drawing you back to something you said before, but I want you to clarify. Just going in the context of the impact on people and Nigerians. You talked about sulfur in the PMS, and you talked about West African countries coming to a conclusion of 50 and Nigeria ready to 200, but some people blended from the outside and brought it in at a level above 8, so that never went below 800. My question is, what's the effect of that? What's the risk of that to Nigerians, both financially and materially? Does that make sense?
So I was talking earlier about the allowable sulfur limit. It's the PIA. So it's not like something some people came up with. It's in the law. It's in the law. It's there. You know, and when you have something in the law, it means that a violation of it is illegal and it's prosecutable, right? ECOWAS came together in 2020, had a convention and agreed based on international conventions on, regulation for gasoline, sulfur limits around the world. It's also because sulfur limit has a consequence on carbon gases and carbon control. And they set their sulfur level at 50 parts per million. And then they said every member of ECOWAS is allowed to revise to an allowable limit. But that allowable limit will terminate December 2024. So NMDPR revised from then DPR before they became NMDPR in 2021. They revised to 200. So when it expired in December, it now came back automatically to 50 parts per million. So what that basically says is that every white fuel, PMS, diesel that comes to Nigeria or that is refined in Nigeria, sulfur level should not be more than 50 parts per million. That's the law. It's the government that wrote the law. Government wrote the law. It's the law. It's there in the PIA. Okay? And the consequence of that is, number one, when you have a refiner here who is producing PMS diesel based on what the law says, and then you have people importing products that are way off the mark, then you don't have a level playing field. It's like you playing a football match. One person has 15 players, the other person has 9. How is that fair?
Kevin, just to make this clear, sorry I'm cutting in. I'm cutting in, but I know Carlo doesn't have much time for people to talk. Please, sorry for cutting in. So I understand the cost and the profit end of it. My question is the concept of sulfur in there. Does it impact people's cars, people's generator? Does it mean because the sulfur is higher that they could have sold it lower to us because we are holding the risk of what will happen to our cars
or machineries? Because the sulfur is higher, they should have sold it lower to you because high sulfur PMS and diesel is cheaper everywhere in the world. That's what I've been trying to say.
Wow.
That's what I've been trying to say, which makes the argument of what they call their landing cost for some of them that bring in product. I don't want to mention names. Questionable.
Wow.
Okay? It makes it questionable. Because the sulfur is high, the price should be lower. And it has an impact on your cars. It not only has an impact on your car, it has an impact on your health. Because high sulfur PMS actually causes cancer. That's what I've been trying to say.
Wow. And of course, Dangote doesn't have high sulfur, if I'm correct, right?
It has world-class labs. You can take the stuff, the PMS or the diesel, you can go and test it in a different lab that is not his own, and then come out with a report and see if it actually meets up or not.
So
that's what I've been trying to say.
Okay, let's go to Baba Charlie. Thanks for calling. Baba Charlie, you've got the floor. Baba Charlie, let's go to Burst. Burst.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Baba Charlie, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, Kalu, Kelvin, and Olumide. It's always nice hearing from you guys. Thank you so much, Kelvin. That's been so insightful. What I'm hearing from you about sulfur sounds like a situation where somebody is bringing in Tokumbo cars and the other person is bringing in brand new cars, and both of them are selling at the same price.
Kind of.
Now, to the issue of solar panel that you recommended to the other lady that spoke earlier, I hope they are all aware that there's discussion right now in government quarters about banning the importation of solar panels. So I don't know if you
They want to increase the tariff, I heard. They want to increase the tariff, which is crazy.
Okay, to encourage local production.
Which is absolutely crazy. Because what has happened, Mr. Baba, is that a local guy, I am sure, has a license to do local factory in Nigeria. So now he has gotten his friends to ban imports so that his own local production would now be quote unquote cheaper. It's nonsense. Yeah.
It's really crazy. But the question I have for Kelvin, we don't have much time. I just have one question. I've been following Kelvin for a while, and I've been seeing the debate around gas pipelines in the southeast, and I just don't get the full picture yet. Now, from what you said today, I think I got more clarity. There is gas pipeline taking gas out of Imo and Abia, but there is no gas supply locally, if I understand what you said. But then my question now is, the Abia State, I think it's Geothermal, the energy electricity project, I understand it's gas powered, and so doesn't that count as a local gas supply? How does that work? I just want to have clarity around.
Baba Charlie, Geometric is an IPP for power generation, is not an aggregator, is not a pipeline infrastructure company. By the way, Geometric has a shortage of gas supply, but I'm not sure that's the position they want to come and put out openly.
I think in Abia State, sir, there's a local gas pipeline, but it's only in it's just in Abia, a certain part of Abia. It's not connected anywhere. It's just within that field and a few industries. It's not in the whole of Abia. It's not connected to Imo State. So it's like a singular artery only in Abia. Then in Imo, the gas pipeline just takes the thing out of Imo. It's not connected in between Imo. So if you look at the map, you are going to see pipeline in Imo State. No, it's just leaving the state. In Abia, you see the pipeline, but it's within that little area of Abia. So, but if you look at maybe the southwest, you see the pipelines are connected. You go to Ikeja, you go to other places, they are connected. There are many industries that are getting power from the gas pipes. Then all those now go towards Ajaokuta, and they're supposed to go up to the north. They go also to West Africa to get Benin and all that. So it's kind of a mess. I'm not sure why Nigeria is not utilizing its gas reserve. Don't we have them in abundance? But thanks, sir. Kevin, before one more speaks, someone asked you a question. Why didn't you advise the government woman on generating power using virtual LNG or CNG? Is it not cost effective or not realistic? I don't know what virtual LNG or CNG is.
Kalu, the person didn't mention that she has to buy gas generator, and gas generator, I don't think she can get it for less than $150,000.
Say it again. $150,000 for the gas generator again. But let's ask her. She's here, madam. You can buy a gas generator for $150,000, and then they can then get the gas in those trucks. Will that work for you? It's going to throw your costs out of the way.
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah. So they're asking, well, why don't you want to use gas, like the portable gas with the gas generator? He's asking, is that not going to be, will that actually throw you off in terms of your costing?
No, we are even, at the business community, my business is located in, we are discussing with an IPP plant for them to supply us power. But they are not willing to disclose their customers so that one can really verify, whether there are issues, whether it will be as constant as they explained. So we are exploring that to know whether they will generate and also supply us. Yes, we visited their plant.
Yeah.
They generate, but they are not willing to disclose their customers so that we can actually verify, how really good and how they supply.
Kevin, if they all come together and buy this gas generator, if there are 10 of them and they buy a gas generator, it's not worthwhile. They buy a big gas generator, buy one truck, those CNG things. Is that something that is viable?
As a matter of fact, there are a handful of companies, a few companies. I don't want to mention names. That
you should mention
Lagos Island that provide these services.
Okay.
They have industrial gas generators. They get CNG.
I think you should mention.
They connect it to estates.
Yes.
Estates of take. There are few estates that have that arrangement. The price per unit is, however, higher. It's over 200 Naira per kilowatt.
Yes, it's over 200.
So it's higher than PHCN.
Yes, higher than
but it's constant.
The price is reliable.
But it will be, if it's regular, yes, it will be good.
Mana, would you prefer regular over cheap?
we prefer regular. We are not looking at cheap. It won't come cheap.
So
definitely won't come cheap.
Regular is more important to you than cheap.
If they have to invest in buying a gas generator to handle the generation themselves, then you have to look at on your balance sheet. You have to start amortizing capex over a period of time.
Yeah. I'll just throw that out there. Okay, no problem. Woma, you go ahead. Yes. Thank you so much, man. Yeah, Woma, please go ahead.
Yes. Good evening. Thanks very much. Straight to it, Kelvin. Thank God I don't catch you for this place. My first question. You've talked about, you are very knowledgeable about inputs. Sorry, what do you call it? Things that, aside the petrol and aviation fuel that are called, how do you call it, constituents that make up the different things that, you refine a barrel of crude oil, the different, products that you get.
The byproducts?
So, the byproducts, exactly. So, thank you for reminding me, yes. Yeah, so, Oga Dangote has started doing his thing. Aside all these, things going on with NNPC and the rest, what are the other byproducts that he is releasing out there? Are there presently off-takers that are using it for manufacturing? If they aren't, are there people that are positioning? If there are people positioning, are there opportunities there? That's my first question. Then my last question is the OB3 pipeline. You talked about gas, how, it's super green, people are talking about it, but it's not some other parts of the south and every other thing, this pipeline has been talked about back and forth, it comes up, I don't know, political. So what's going on? Because I think, you will tell us, the pipeline can have people, be able to be a lot more assertive with industry and, power generation. Because the way you've talked about even these gas generators, I even want to ask if it's something that, people can put in their local government for some kind of mini industry and clusters and all that. Yeah, thank you.
Kevin?
Carlo, I don't even know how to answer the question.
I think the first question you've already addressed. I know maybe you addressed it a bit, the first one, but the second one maybe. Well, go ahead, sir. Just if you can give him,
Yeah, so, he's doing LPG, he's selling LPG to the Nigerian markets. If you ask LPG dealers, they'll tell you they've been buying LPG from him. And the reason why he also has advantages with that is because he has a blend of heavy crude that produces more butane than propane. And Nigeria needs more butane than propane. So if you notice, even before he came, and then people in Nigeria, dealers, bulk storage and processing companies were buying propane from NLNG. They were still importing butane to sell to the Nigerian markets, because the Nigerian market cannot use pure propane because of the boiling and pressure point. You can't use pure propane in Nigeria. So doing LPG, I told you we started polymers like 2 weeks ago. I started taking polymers. Sorry, just give me a second. Carbon black. You have base oil has not started because a lot of the residual fuel oils that you need to process to non-transportation fuels, which are the heavier distillates when you refine. So the vacuum distillation unit has not come into use yet. So because you can't produce base oil which is the base for refining, for producing and processing into lubricants if you don't have a vacuum distillation unit. So hopefully in the future, I think they should be able to do base oil. So jets, AGU, PMS, polymers, PE, PP, PVC, carbon black. Some of the RFOs are exported as RFOs. Second question you asked, Carl, I think you asked the question around power.
And one more step, real quick. What was the second question? Real quick.
Yeah, it was around the OB3 pipeline.
Okay.
And the completion and the controversy around that. What's going on?
They've not been able to cross the river Niger. That's what is going on. So between Enugu and Ajaokuta, there's a river. If you don't want to go through the river, you have to go through road to Benue. You can't take it through road. The shorter cut is the river. So you have to cross the river Niger, and they've not been able to cross.
Is it because of money? Is it because of technical capacity? It's a river now.
Like this is you're asking the same questions I'm asking, because there are so many things that doesn't make sense in Nigeria.
Okay, I don't think let's just leave that alone.
You can imagine companies drilling 2,000 meters deep offshore. They have them bring drill ships, and they're able to drill 2,000 meters, 3,000 meters deep offshore. And you cannot cross a shallow river 1.84 kilometers. It doesn't make any sense. But we're in Nigeria.
But if we have money, we can just give someone to do. But I digress. Let's go to BURST. 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 Is everyone able to speak? Let's go to Mr. Godswill Nwankwo. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Kelvin. Been listening for quite some time. Very impressed with the facts and the figures that you've been spitting out. My contribution is I see lots of missed opportunities in Nigeria. Here in the US, the majority of the large component of the oil and gas value chain is the midstream. Actually, I think midstream is almost the same market cap as the upstream. I mean, you have the big players like the likes of Kinder Morgan, Enbridge, Enterprise Products, Williams, Enterprise Energy Transfer. These are big companies. These are huge market cap companies that not just create, a huge community of well-paying jobs, well-paying engineers, but also, have they keep expanding all across the United States, because I had a little bit of engagement with companies in this industry, there's a huge pipeline network running all across the United States, moving gas. I'm talking about gas pipelines, moving gas from one end of the US to the other end. I mean, it's just huge. You can Google it for yourself. And I keep thinking, how is an oil-producing country like Nigeria only have upstream? I mean, our downstream is just, Dangote, but we have zero midstream play or value chain in the oil and gas. Even the upstream is still struggling. So my question is, I know we've talked about it and you've delved a little bit about it. Why is it difficult for those that are elected leaders just remove the bottleneck to allow private players to come in and actually galvanize this midstream sector of the oil and gas industry and just make it vibrant like every other oil producing country? Now, my second question, which is real going to be quick, is what in the world is happening to our nuclear power plants? I heard that there was a nuclear power plant that was being built in Canada. Was it, they call it Girigu nuclear power plant in Kogi State? And they've talked about it forever, but nothing is being done about it. I mean, we have uranium deposits all across Nigeria, from Kogi to Calabar and all over the place. But this is something that a nuclear power plant could actually solve majority of our domestic electrical demand issues, because they are dependable. You put them in place and they keep producing and producing. They have less moving parts, they have less maintenance costs, and they are consistent. So what is happening with our nuclear power plants? Thank you.
Wow. So before Kevin goes to the technical side, it goes to nuclear. You want nuclear in Nigeria? So the guys will go on strike. The nuclear, I don't want it in my look. I'm just
actually they are safer. They are safer. I should think of it.
Safer abroad, but not in Nigeria. Do you really want nuclear in Nigeria? Really? Where will they keep the rods? Where will they keep the rods? The fuel rods? Man, I don't want that thing anywhere, because we had a nuclear reactor in ABU. I don't know if you're aware of that. And then the Russians, the Americans, and the Chinese had a joint special ops operation. When we had Boko Haram, they came to Nigeria, removed it. 3 of them combined, removed it. Because, and that's just the pitfall of having a nuclear reactor in Nigeria. It's a shame that those 3 countries had to put aside whatever grief they had, come to Nigeria, and execute the removal of a nuclear reactor. You can Google it. So, I mean, imagine NNP, the nuclear reactor union goes on strike, then someone doesn't change the rods. Because it can happen. Or downfall people not going, then or they'll do corruption, the rods will not be disposed properly. But Kevin, please, it's not really a joke, but I'm just saying, I don't want that thing anywhere near. Kevin, he asked his first question, guys, if you can.
If you actually put uranium in the centrifuge and enrich it in isotopes, EDF, about 67% of the electricity EDF generates is from nuclear. They buy uranium from Russia, they buy from Africa, and they supply, I think about 71% of what they generate is actually exported to the EU. In 2023, they generated over $30 billion exporting electricity around the European Union. So for a controlled environment, yes, nuclear is cheaper. In fact, the EU is building a nuclear reactor, about $22 billion, because they are trying to reduce their power cost and also diversify risk away from gas, LNG imports from the US, pipe gas, that stuff coming from Russia and Nord Stream 1 and 2. So nuclear is good in controlled, regulated environment where systems work, people do their jobs. Not in Nigeria, unfortunately. Not in Nigeria. On your second question about the midstream sector, which is what we discussed basically all evening. The midstream sector is where the real opportunities are, because upstream is very capital intensive. The barrier to entry is too high. The midstream sector barrier to entry is high also because refineries are so expensive to build, especially when you're building a commercial size one. Modular refineries, I don't think you can build a modular refinery with a catalytic reforming unit, 10,000 barrels for less than $70 million in today's market. Maybe 60, 70 million. That's about what it will cost you. How many people can put that money down, If you're going to get a financier, project finance to borrow the money to build, the business case, does it make sense? Are you going to get crude feedstock? How are you going to get it? If you're not operating your own marginal field and operating a vertical model, who are you going to get the feedstock from that are willing to give you 10,000 barrels per day? All these are questions that the financiers will ask you. gas, there's opportunity. Pipeline infrastructure, there's opportunity. You know, so yeah. To your point about how you have pipeline infrastructure running all around through America. Well, it is America. It is not Nigeria. America is not Nigeria. We're at 5,000 multi-product pipeline infrastructure. We've been listening to us talk about the fact that in 2 years, NNPC has not been able to cross 1.8 kilometer pipeline across River Niger from Enugu to Ajaokuta. 24 calendar months. So what are we talking about? So you just have this system where the state-owned enterprise owns these assets, sitting on these assets, it's running a vertical monopoly, does not have the technical capacity, does not have the financial capacity to unlock the value in these assets, and they stay the way they are, and the government is not willing to do anything about it.
Interesting, sir. Interesting. Let's get false. Mr. Goodwill, are you okay? Mr. Goodwill, you're good? Okay, perfect. Let's get Faustina.
I just wanted to say something. Just, it's absolutely possible to actually attract a lot of private players in just the pipeline, just putting pipelines all across the country, because once you put pipelines...
Also, they operate a closed loop. They own it. They control it. They don't want to operate an open access model where you have PPPs. That's the problem. As soon as you change the model, you see capital begin to rush in. There's also the problem about security of those pipelines. That's a major problem.
So is the president not aware of what you're saying? Does the president not want investment in gas pipelines? Why can't somebody else see this stuff you're saying? Why can't we just do it tomorrow and get investments in? Abia State, of course, has investors that can come and take over pipelines. Imo State as well, Ogun, Edo, everyone has. So why can't we do it tomorrow and get private investment in? Why is it a big... Why?
Wow.
Again, Kevin will start asking him questions, but I mean, it's just... If that is the issue, if we can't cross a river, then decentralize this thing. This thing we're giving states the power licenses. Allow states to say, okay, if we get a technical partner in, we can get our own power, deliver power supply to our local government. Even okay, I don't. Why is it so bureaucracy? Everything is a problem. I don't know, man. Let's get Faustina. Faustina,
yeah. My hand has been up.
Yeah, we'll come to you. Don't worry. Your hand has been up, but we'll come to you. Faustina Chuku, please go ahead. Faustina going once, Faustina going twice. Let's get the gentleman who says hand has been up. Please go ahead, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Carlo. Thank you, Kelvin. So, Carlo, your last sentence said I've just, spoken to all the questions raised today. So, I'll just start. I have some questions to ask, but I just want to start by saying that, the quagmire that we're in Nigeria is just because of one particular beast that we have been facing since the military took over, which is the over centralization of government. I think that is the real problem that we're facing, over centralization of government, and that has, you can see the effect of that in the energy sector, the crude oil sector, and all the rest. So that is the problem, because I can start by asking Kelvin, why do we have something called, what is the meaning of the national grid? What's the meaning of the national grid? So why can't I have a company, maybe a private company like Cement, coming to my state and say, okay, you know what, we want to handle generation, we want to handle transmission, we want to handle distribution of power up from the local government to the state government, cut across everywhere, and then we can scale up. If the close by states want the same service, you could easily push it to that state. Why can't we have it? You see, so it's still the structure. It's still the structure that we are talking about. It's still the structure, and then you go to the energy sector too. Why do we have gas? Why don't we have, like Abia State? The good governor of Abia State have been trying to push, but you see, he's been met with so many debacles. Why is there the debacles there? Number one, he's been suffering to get gas for the power plant he's trying to set up. The same beast is there. Over centralization, national grid. Different states, River State built an independent power plant. My state, Akwa Ibom State, built an independent power plant in Ikorobasi of about 190 megawatt capacity. And guess what? Federal government wanted him to send the down to the national grid. What is the national grid, for Pete's sake? So these are just the little issues. And so if we can just take out